we actually, Al's not here yet. Oh, there you go, great. All right, now we got it. So thank you all for being with us for our work session today. And does everybody have a copy of the agenda? So we're going to be going over issues related to infrastructure and planning in Buncombe County, which is obviously a big issue for our growing community and a topic of strong public interest. So appreciate everyone being with us today to talk about some of the different things happening in the community related to infrastructure planning and how our community is going to grow in the coming years. So I appreciate everyone's time this afternoon. And Nate is going to coordinate this for us. So Nate, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started.
Okay, thank you, Chair Newman, Commissioners. Good to have you. It's good to have everyone here in the audience. We've got quite a presentation for you today. It's definitely comprehensive in nature. First thing I'd like to do, just because they're going to be part of our discussion later on, but there are a couple of panelists that we'll have to probably sneak out due to the longevity of the session. So if it's okay, panelists, could you just real quickly start with you, Chad, just introduce yourself and please introduce your representative agency or utility.
Chad Pierce, and I represent the City of Asheville Water Resources Department. I'm the Engineering Services Manager for Water Resources Department.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Jason.
So I'm Jason Walls, I'm the District Manager with Duke Energy, and I do get my own table. So if any of the PSNC guys need an extra table, I've got a chair.
I'm Cole Hood with the North Carolina Department of Transportation. I work right here in Asheville as the Division of Project Development.
Troy Wilson, I'm with the North Carolina Department of Transportation. I'm the district engineer here in Asheville.
I'm Abby Anderson with Rebase Regional Council on Economic and Development.
Tom Hardy from the Metropolitan Sewers District. I'm manager.
I'm Lee McElrath, PSNC Energy. I'm manager of large accounts. We brought three of us to make sure we could answer any question.
Yeah, they got us.
Two. I drove. I'm Mike Lewis, regional engineer for PSNC Energy.
Great.
Don Hollis, PSNC.
Okay, thank you, panelists. Chair Newman has already introduced the topic today. This is an infrastructure planning presentation and overview, and it's a work session. We have other representatives that are present in the room. We've brought to you some staff from Buncombe County Transportation. We have Matt Cable with us today. We have Matt Stone for Permits and Inspections, Josh O'Connor from Parks and Recreation, and we have the professionals who you've already met. Also, commissioners, in front of you today, you have a blizzard of paper. We did that to help you along in the presentation. We'll be making numerous references to the plans in front of you. A couple of things that you have a copy of the land use plan, the sustainability plan, you have a list of zoning districts, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint slides. We did also include an article that we'll be making reference to later on in the presentation. And we have included, for general reference, a map of the Buncombe County greenways and trails. So the way this is going to work today, we just thought, let's just have a discussion, okay? That's the best way for fruitful information to be shared, as well as a path to move forward. When we start talking about infrastructure, we're going to have a conversation about growth in general. We're at that juncture, and that's the best way for staff to hear you in terms of formulating policy and implementing changes that you'd like to see to the ordinances that we maintain and that we enforce. We're going to have open dialogue with the commissioners and with the panelists once that we open it up to the individual industry experts you see here before you on your panel. They also have included some supplemental slides that they'd like to share with you as well. And then we're going to move into a future growth discussion, and then we're going to leave it for questions and, to your liking, adjournment. So let's just go over a couple quick facts about Buncombe County, and let's give you a couple of comparisons to see where we stack up. Estimated population, 257,607, that's a 2017 population. We have 6 municipalities located within our fair county, roughly 660 square miles of land area. Before you'll see a quick figure on the roads. Maintenance of approximately 1,260 miles of water lines, roughly the same, a little under 1,078 miles of sewer, almost 7,000 fire hydrants, 21 fire departments, which is inclusive of the municipalities, and 14 total miles of trails/greenways. In comparison, if you look at Rebase County, they have 206,872, and New Hanover County with 227,198. The difference is they're about half the size in terms of the size of the county itself. As we move through the presentation, I'd like to draw your attention in the upper left-hand corner. You're going to see some symbology that just helps you really tie in what slide we're looking at and what we're trying to convey in our message to you. So we try to keep it really simple. Drop for water, sewer cap for sewer, flame for natural gas, the bicycle for transportation, zoning, well, it's a zoning map, recycle sign for landfill, flood is a stream, and growth is an upward trend. So basically, what I'm going to do is provide a quick overview of the different areas that we have panelists for. I'm just going to give some quick facts. You're going to get most of your information derived from the individual panelists themselves. So let's talk a little bit about water in the county. Potable water is supplied by the city of Asheville. It's also supplied by the municipalities. The greatest majority of the water is supplied by the city of Asheville, and it comes from 2 of the most pristine reservoirs in the area, North Fork and Beetree. There's a long history of water distribution in the county. We're not going to get into it. There's been multiple acts that have been passed through the legislature that date all the way back to the Great Depression. The difference is in Buncombe County, Asheville, there's not the ability to charge differential water rates, unlike when you go out to other communities, like say Marion is able to charge, and McDowell County is able to charge a differential water rate to county residents that are not part of the jurisdiction. If you look at the distribution, that's yes.
Can't some of the other municipalities charge different rates?
They can. I just use that
It's
as
just one that can, right?
White Forks for Marion, so I just use that.
Sorry, what?
White Forks for Marion, so I just
Right.
use that as an example.
Right, but like Weaverville,
Sure,
others in the county, they don't all run their own water system, but they can.
that's right.
Thanks.
Unique to Asheville.
Right.
Don't they basically buy water from Asheville?
Weaverville?
There,
No.
Chad would probably tell you that. Black Mountain does, others do.
But some of them have their own water
Right.
sources too, right? Like Woodman and Black Mountain.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, we're a redundant supply for most folks.
Great, thanks.
And some are a certain percentage, like Black Mountain supplies about 80% of their water and buys the other percentage from Asheville. So, the distribution is high in terms of Asheville's provision for water to residents. You can see that there. What we're also going to try to do is present facts and also graphically represent it to you in map form. What we have mapped before you is basically the water hydrants. There are some concerns with Homeland Security, so we're not able to disseminate all the water line information, but we can sort of paint a picture with the fire hydrants that you see here. They're concentrated to our valley locations, and they surround our incorporated areas. Asheville, as well as the other municipalities, have what's called a water availability and allocation process. So when a developer is looking to, say, put in a new multifamily development or open a manufacturing plant, they go through this allocation process to make sure that there's adequate supply in order to meet that demand. The other thing that's tricky sometimes too is every day we get calls from folks that will say, hey, I'm right near a water line, we'd like to get service. Well, the first thing they're gonna do is call Chad or one of the municipalities, and they may find out, actually, that's a trunk line that supplies the entire city of Asheville. We'd have to put 4 reducing valves on that to supply you water. So while it may be immediately available in the area, it also depends on the type of pressure that's supplied. Sometimes even we have what are called lower capacity lines. Chad can speak to this as well, but there's just not enough pressure to allow one additional home even sometimes. MSD. MSD is its own nonprofit, publicly owned utility. They operate all throughout Buncombe County. They also maintain a wastewater treatment plant in Woodfin, and they have a board. There should be at least one board member in this room. I believe Jim Mullins with us. So there are others on the commission.
Yeah.
And maybe Libby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, multiple people on the board.
Everybody wants to be unsuitable.
So MSD also has an availability letter and allocation process as well, and it's just to assure that there is the capacities to support whatever development or industry is coming down the pipe. So graphically represented, again, you'll see the trend. We hug the more urban areas, we're in our valley locations, and I'm sure our MSD representative will tell you we operate on gravity. Mostly. We don't like pump stations, right? So I'd like you all to look at this map. What this map is showing you is what we tried to do is build in what future capacity looks like. These are properties 100 feet within water and sewer lines, and this just sort of gives you an idea to build and show you what areas could be further expanded that are within a reasonable distance. It doesn't mean all these areas can be serviced, but it just sort of builds a picture. The one thing I do see off the bat that mapped automatically is Montreat does have an ETJ that's intact, and I would not say that all those areas are serviceable. You'll notice that to the north of the town itself, and most of those are on the side of the mountain. So that's one anomaly that I will point out on this map.
Hey,
Yes.
just on water and sewer, this information might be good to put on the county website. So we get questions all the time about water and sewer. Is it level out here, is it close, or we haven't answered a lot of questions with some people that are at it, it's in the outline here.
It's a good point. Later on, we're going to be talking about what we can do. And actually, the planning department's going to be up for a website upgrade soon. So we'd like to kind of give you a teaser of some of the things we're thinking about that might help our public.
You get it right?
You did it. Yeah. So let's see. Natural gas, PSNC, another representative. They have a whole group with them today. They supplied us with a couple of maps to sort of look at where we are, state of the state, with gas lines in the county. What you see before you, it's a little pixelated because we had to try to make it large enough to see, is what the current lines look like, as well as some additions that PSNC is proposing. Note 221 corridor going north to Marion. That's one thing that PSNC sees as a growth area. They can speak more to that when we get to them. But we just thought we'd like to show that, as well as the study corridor in Asheville, which follows Brevard Road. That's another project I know they're excited about, and you guys are currently going through the planning phases and getting your route approved and going through the federal and state levels. The Utilities Commission, okay. So transportation corridors. These are the areas where we most likely are going to see our development because utilities are present. NCDOT, they're going through a new phase where they're looking at multimodal transportation and not just vehicles. You know, I went to a presentation recently and they said, you know, we don't just do cars, we do airplanes, buses, bikes, pedestrians. And really, it's kind of seeing when they do expansions, they're looking at areas, you know, what if we can do a sidewalk here, can we get you to pitch in, community? Maybe you do a local match. Maybe we can extend a sidewalk somewhere. And opportunities like that are good because it gives us the ability to grow where we can and extend services where the rural meets the urban areas. Long Shoals, Airport Road, Pisgah Highway on here, you see 70 hugging next to 40 and New Leicester Highway, Barnersville Highway, although Barnersville is one of our more rural areas that we don't see a lot of growth in. Parks and Greenways, there are a number of items that are shown on here, including future trail networks. There's also the Mountains to Sea Trail, Fonta Flora, which is the goal is eventually to have a trail that runs from Buncombe County through McDowell County. We also have, Charles Owen Park. You've got the Warren Wilson Trail System. We've got the Buncombe County Sports Park out here. So we have a number of facilities, and the goal in mind is to eventually connect them all through a trail system that gets folks not only just to one area of the county, but really extends it where folks can sample nature and get out there in a way that doesn't just involve a vehicle. Another element of public transportation that we'd like to showcase is our mountain mobility system. We have Matt Cable here for specific questions, but essentially we operate 3 routes: the North Buncombe, Black Mountain, Inca Candler route. All of these areas, or all of these routes, connect to the Asheville Redefines transportation system. So it does get you to another public transportation system that has a much more wide and broad range within the urban areas themselves. There's also demand response and subscription services available for those areas that are not included within these 3 routes that Matt can speak to if there are specific questions. And we did include some just some facts from the last fiscal year that we put up on the map as well. A lot of people wouldn't think that the landfill is part of infrastructure, but it is. It's not an unlimited resource, and it's certainly important. As we continue to grow, we're going to produce more trash. So having a plan that speaks to our future needs is definitely important. We operate the municipal service and the construction and debris landfills separately. That helps us extend the life of the landfill. And another thing we'd like to showcase is we don't just flare off that gas, the landfill gas. We actually produce electricity with it. Enough actually to power 1,100 homes. So another Buncombe County construction project that's currently underway is the transfer station. So this transfer station's been in need of an upgrade, and we are moving forward with that upgrade. This will add some safety components to the project itself, and it allows for folks to drop off recyclables and trash. And it also, a lot of people don't understand this. Every trash truck from the city of Asheville goes to this Buncombe County facility before that waste is hauled off to the landfill itself. You actually need different trucks to get to the landfill. They're typically longer, and they're more of a rectangle shape than just our traditional trash truck that loads from the back and puts dumpsters on the top. So Buncombe County zoning. It was established in 2009. It's been around for almost a decade now. Zoning is not perfect. Zoning is a study, and it goes all the way back to Euclid versus Ambler. It goes back to the early century, part of the century. So at first, the idea was to separate inappropriate uses from more prevalent uses that you might find in an area. So if you had a single-family neighborhood, you obviously wouldn't want an industry plopped right in the middle of it. We learned those lessons throughout United States history. Now what we're moving towards is more of a mixed-use pattern. What we initially tried to do is just understand what the county needs were based on the uses that we had going on. So when we established countywide zoning at the time, you only had Beaver Dam and Limestone. Those were the 2 areas that had zoning. What this did is it extended it out to the county. It clustered the more urbanized areas around the municipalities. Those are where you see your more traditional districts. Hold on to the next slide and I'll show you an example of that. And it ringed those with less dense districts and overlays. To your right, you actually see, this is the Beaver Dam area. The blue represents the steep slope areas. The brown is a protected ridge. So basically what that does is it maps out your either fall side of your ridge lines. There's also, this is in the vicinity of the Blue Ridge Parkway, so you're seeing a little bleed over from the Blue Ridge Parkway overlay itself. So, what does that look like? Well, it includes the following graphic representation on this slide. The OU, the open use, this is the majority of the county. It's our more rural areas, and it's more appropriate to the rural nature, the more agricultural uses. It allows for more flexibility in what can be put on the ground, but it's also constrained by infrastructure. We don't have the water and sewer service that you find in the more urban areas. So it's important now to realize, let's have a conversation about urban and rural level of service. If you're in the planning department, ring ring, phone call comes in, someone from New Jersey, so in Barnardsville, you gonna get me my sewer and water hookup? No sir, we're not. Because that is a rural level of service. And we've talked about the constraints of where we have our utilities. They're in our urban areas. But most people don't understand that, especially with folks that are coming in here today. So, the open use provides the transition necessary to facilitate uses found in rural areas with the limited infrastructure. Tend to be more agriculture and pastoral in nature. The transition area from rural levels of service, where you have volunteer fire departments, septic systems, wells, gravel and dirt roads, and a lot of privately maintained roads, with the exception of the DOT maintained roads that you'll find in the rural areas as well. They're just not as much. So in the urban level service, you see more things like sidewalks, amenities, fire and EMS, faster response times, paved roads, parks, water and sewer systems. So in this graphic representation, you see your residential districts, which are your R1, R2, R3, and residential low density. You have your commercial districts. The commercial are also mixed use because they allow residential uses as well. The incorporated areas you can see on there, they're included in gray. And then the Biltmore, just for reference purposes, right there in the center. So let's look at this graphically. What do the zoning districts look like graphically? This is an easy way to see and understand the table of allowed uses here. So you see Beaver Dam where you start out. Beaver Dam's the most restricted. It's residential. That goes all the way back to when Beaver Dam was first established. As you move through, you start seeing things become a little more populated. Duplexes, housing choices. As you become into your more dense areas, these are the areas that are going to see the urban levels of service. They're going to see the water, the sewer. And as you get into your commercial areas, you'll see more types of uses that are allowed there that are appropriate for those zoning districts themselves. And then of course open use allows a number of uses, but it's constrained by utilities. It's at the mercy of what can be approved from a well and septic perspective. So, what's going on in planning right now? Well, we're busy. They're busy in permits and inspections. We're just up all across the board. Some of the trend lines you can see, it's hard to believe where we are. We're actually in development boom, as we'd like to call 2.0. 1.0 was 06. So we had the Great Recession, and we're back. I would like to point this out too. If you look at the subdivisions, most of the subdivisions we get that come through on a day-to-day basis, that someone walks in, they're like, hey, I need my plat signed. They're doing small potato stuff. They're doing like 1 to 3 lots. These minor subdivisions and these major subdivisions, they require a lot more extra work. They require coordination with water, with sewer, with permits and inspections, environmental health. They require coordination with our fire marshal to make sure that we can get the appropriate apparatus out there and we can serve these larger scale developments with appropriate levels of service. Now, the other thing to note too is that while you see the numbers up here, what it does not account for are what we like to call zombie projects. So during development boom 1.0, you had a number of subdivisions that flipped right off the radar. No one touched them. Developer walked away. We are seeing folks come in and buy those up or finish them out. Now that's a good thing because it puts the properties on the tax roll, and it doesn't leave them just out there with something hanging out there that's either dangerous, half-built, something that's going to get vandalized. So we're finishing out projects too, and that's a good thing. Let's talk a little bit about annexation in former ETJ areas. The legislature back in 2011 and 2012, they started looking at the powers of towns and cities and incorporated areas to do involuntary annexation. They significantly curbed that ability back in the 2011 and 2012 legislative sessions. So what that did was it didn't allow cities to just proactively identify what properties met the test for development and then submit those and go ahead and snatch them up. What it said basically is that property owners need to come to an incorporated area and basically say, we'd like to be annexed. A lot of times what we see now is it's really more for alcohol sales. You've got somebody who wants to serve hard liquor. You'll see this a lot around Airport Road. Or they just desire city services or a tool, a zoning tool that an incorporated area might offer. They might have some specific application that they look for. It's important to note that 2 of the 3 abolished ETJs in the state reside in Buncombe County, and that's the city of Asheville, 2013, and Weaverville in 2014. Montreat maintains a small area that's ETJ in the county, and it's more for preservation purposes, and it's to the north of the town itself. Now, with the ETJs, these represent high growth potential due to the availability of infrastructure, and in the next couple slides we're going to look at what those look like before and after. Okay, so let's look at the city of Asheville. This is the before look when the ETJ was intact. Asheville has a lot more zoning districts than what the county has. And they probably have a lot more now that they've done some corridor zoning as well. So this is what it looked like before. This is what it looked like after. And we're going to kind of go back and forth just so you can see the difference. But basically what we did is we were in kind of a lurch. So we had a limited amount of time to assign zoning districts to these former ETJ areas when the state abolished them. So what we did was with the city, they had RS2, that was their most restrictive zoning district. Those became R1. That's our most, other than Beaver Dam, that's one of our most restrictive districts. R2, R3, those were reserved for the city's RM districts, which are multifamily as well. So we put a lot of time and thought into matching the city's districts in the former ETJ with ours and try to match them up as best as we could given the resources we had at the time. Weaverville, smaller ETJ. It's kind of an odd shape. Weaverville sort of hugs 26 and has sort of an offshoot to the east. In the middle it had ETJ area. Weaverville only has a few districts. So what we did again, they have a couple things to point out. C1 and C2, those are their 2 commercial districts. Those are really just, there's a couple splotches here and there, and we tried to match them up as best as we could. The majority of those areas being residential in nature. Before, after. Okay. So what else, what are the other things that we need to be looking at in our county to paint a better picture of where we are? City obviously in the middle, Black Mountain, Montreat to the east, and to the north we have Woodfin and Weaverville. Where are our constrained areas? Well, one of the most protected areas is a watershed. We follow state rules that basically only allow 1 home per acre lot size. And that's because of the watershed. You have the Forks of Ivy Inlet up here. You have the steep slope areas, you've got Pisgah, you've got the Burnett Reservoir. We've got agricultural areas, we have conserved lands, and we also have some floodplain throughout the county. And that's the ironic thing about the mountains. When you're in a valley and you're in the most developable area, you also have the floodplain, because it follows the flattest course. We also have other protected areas. A lot of our rich agricultural areas are going to be in Sandy Mush, Lester, and also quite a bit down here in Fairview as well. So, a quick note on watersheds. We have the Broad River over here on this side. In the Ivy area, we've got Ivy, Reeves Creek, Sandy Mush, Turkey, Hominy, all feeding into the French Broad. Payne Creek over here, and then of course to the east we have the Swananoa, the tributaries associated with that, the Flat Creek, and I remember I drawn a blank on the other one over there. Anybody know off the top of their head? So this is a graphic representation of the floodplains themselves. You can see some of the larger scale ones, the Swananoa, there's the Burnett Reservoir, Payne Creek here, French Broad, and some of the tributaries that come off of it. Okay, so some of our conservation and voluntary agricultural districts. This just gives a good graphic representation of what those look like. There's also public trust lands, there's federal, there's state, there are forest areas. The Blue Ridge Parkway, of course, also bisects the county. We have the Voluntary Agricultural District, which is voluntary. It allows a 10-year conservation agreement. It's non-binding. We also have a more advanced Voluntary Agricultural District, but it is binding. It's called the EVAD. It allows a cost share program with soil and water, and allows things, farmers can get some benefit with fencing that keeps cattle from going to the bathroom in the tributaries themselves. And so it really helps with the water quality and protecting a resource in that regard. So, we're a gateway community, and we all know this. What does that mean for us? Well, it means everyone wants to live here, and we host a good deal of play. So what's the first thing you do when you come to Buncombe County? Well, you're probably landing in Asheville Regional, or you're coming in from one of the larger airports, you're driving in, and we're a springboard to so many different things. But that's tricky. So just like Charleston, just like the Florida Keys, just like Vail, just like all these other areas, Portland, Oregon, it requires a good deal of tactical planning in order to protect our resources, protect our community, but also balance it out so that it's sustainable. And what we need to do, and what we try to do, is we look at what's good for us. We don't look to adopt rules and regulations, not just because everybody else is doing it, but what's the right fit for our community. Well, sometimes when you do that, you have to balance what we call the seesaw. And it's the hardest thing to do as an elected official, as an employee of the county, as a planning department. It's really tough sometimes to help the development community and the citizenry understand that you need both sides in order to have a sustainable community. So how do you do that? Well, you make the rules too hard and the development community may balk. You make them too easy and the residents will complain. This is especially tricky given the uniqueness of our community, especially with the rural meeting that we're in. And this is also tricky when you have so many different constraints that we have in our community. There's a great article we've included in your packets. It's the black and white one, and it's entitled Exurvia. We won't get into it, but I invite you to look at a couple of highlighted areas that are in the article. It really speaks to some of the uniqueness that we're running across on a day-to-day basis and kind of the state of where we are with things. So let's sort of look at where we are. Here's a map that just shows the explosion of permits since 2015. Well, it's not isolated to one area. The one thing we can point out, I can show you a couple of the larger projects if you like. This is Hawthorne at Weaverville. Here's one we all know. Over here, this is the Asheville Buncombe Educational Housing, so off New Leicester. You can see a concentration of multifamily over here. We have the Haven and Inca Lake, Graymont Village, Asheville Exchange. Other areas, Dilworth, Long Shoals Apartments. We have the Perry Lane project, which is an affordable development. And then every other where you'll see just concentrations of smaller development, duplexes, single-family homes. And the more you see the circles cluster, that indicates, well, in this area you probably have a subdivision. But we don't just do permits for just the county, we also do permit review for some of the other municipalities that are not large enough to have that capacity.
Do you know the yellow dot out in Leicester, is that the mountain housing?
That is the one I did not identify.
Yeah, it's the one across from me.
So this is what's called a heat map, and it gives you a really cool way of looking at things and visualizing things. So if we go from here, this gives you a way of saying where are the areas where it's most dense. Well, remember that cluster we looked at right there? That just gives you a way of looking at it from a thermal perspective. A lot of development in the Weaverville area, Inca Candler, Long Shoals Airport Road, Fairview Road, and the beginnings of where we see development in Swananoa, and probably in the future more development along the Leicester corridor as well. Major and minor subdivisions. We looked at this graph earlier. This is just a graphic way of looking at things. We can point out a couple things for you. Parker Cove subdivision, out Inca Candler. I don't have this marked with a red dot, but that's Liberty Oaks, which is under construction. You can see it from Smoky Park Highway. They actually had to lower and relocate some of the power poles there to get it at a better grade. Preserve at Avery's Creek, Pinnacle at Arabella, and out east we have the Bee Tree Cliffside. Let's talk real quick too. We talked earlier about subdivisions themselves. The lots themselves is up to 3. That's the lion's share. Some on small potatoes that come into the office, they're just looking for a quick plat sign off. 4 to 10 get you in the minor subdivision category. You're getting slightly more improved roads. You're getting something that's a little more tangible. You'll see some pavement. You might even see gravel if it's at the correct grade. And then the larger scale subdivisions are major subdivisions. That's where you're seeing your paved roads, more appropriate for development of that size. County-owned properties. The reason we want to show you this is as we move forward too, SECU housing was basically county property. So the county's part of that for that project was to donate that piece of property to allow for that development to happen. As we move forward, as we look at affordable housing strategies, it may be important to inventory county properties for collaboration or partnerships in the future that allow, if a land trust is established, if another group is established, this may give us an opportunity. If we're not able to give money, maybe it's an opportunity to partner up and look at options for land. So that's why we put that up on there. Look at all the county properties in the city too. quite a bit. It happens all the time, foreclosures. I mean, we get quite a bit of property. I think Keith Miller's here too from tax, if we have questions down the road. Okay, the next two maps are heat maps again. I'm going to toggle back and forth because there is a difference between the next two slides. One is 2015, the next one is 2018. The heat map is based on the location of parcels, and heat sensitivity is adjusted by tax value in order to visualize developed lot density. So this is 2015. This is 2018. Now, on the surface, you might not see a lot of change, but let's look at a couple of areas. Let's look at the Brevard Road corridor, Long Shoals, Avery Creek, Weaverville, and the Sweeten Road corridors. So you can sort of see the difference here between those areas as they get warmer, especially in Avery Creek. Watch Weaverville too. Darkens up, but you're comparing two things in here too. You're also looking at tax value as well as density. So there have been changes that have occurred in that regard as well. So at this juncture of the presentation, we have our formal panel with us today. We'd like to give them an opportunity to present to you a number of facts, figures. A couple of them have extra supplemental slides they'd like to share with you. And so if there's no objections, let's move into the panel. Does that sound like a good idea, Commissioner? Let's see. Should we start PSNC or should we start for Duke Energy side, or should we flip it? Jason, go.
Ooh, so how do you want us to do this?
I think you just you kind of introduce yourself. You tell us what the mission of your organization is. You let us know about any cool projects you got happening, and kind of where you see development and growth in the county with your respective organizations.
All over. So since I'm Jason Walls, I'm the district manager with Duke Energy, and Jerry Rice and I have gotten to know each other fairly well over the years. So Jerry, can you flip those two light switches off for a second? Now, can you flip them back on? That's the mission of my organization, is to keep the lights on. And so if it's open, I'm sorry. Okay, I feel like I'm kind of lighting things up. It seems like a really serious conversation. So I want to tell you a story. So I'm notorious for not reading deep into emails or calendar notices, so I didn't hear that I should have sent some slides to Nate earlier. So I brought supplemental, I think they're called supplemental slides. I like to just call them the information I didn't send to Nate before the meeting. And so everybody look at this package. If anybody wants one back, I've got a few extra copies. Just knock Nate on the head and bring it to you. So if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, I would like to kind of tell it as a story, and I'll be fast as possible. Okay? So look at the first slide. The first slide is called the evolution of energy. You tear it off, it's a lot more fun if you do it that way, because then it's kind of interactive. And so a lot of times when I'm doing this presentation in front of a large group, and we can do this if y'all want to, it just depends on how you're feeling. You can make hand binoculars like this, right? And I like to stand about this point right here, because if you look up until this point, our industry has been relatively linear. We started building power plants, different environmental rules came along, we added environmental controls on power plants, new technologies came about, we diversified how we generate electricity, and we're standing at a really important crossroads in our entire industry. And so when we think about that, we look more at the future like this as opposed to a straight line. Because there is a whole host of technologies and innovations and things out there that are transforming how we keep the lights on for our customers. From battery storage to advances in solar energy to things that we don't even know about. Automated metering infrastructure that allows for greater communication flow with customers. There's just a lot of things going on. So from a global perspective, right, we're in an industry that's at an interesting crossroads where we're standing with our past behind us, looking ahead at how we're going to get through a relatively uncharted future, which is kind of nice. But y'all aren't here to hear about Duke Energy globally. You want to hear about our region, right, Nate?
That's right.
to tear this piece of paper off, and you look at this one. It looks pretty slick, doesn't it? It's intentional. So look in the middle. There's a number. What is that number?
2 million.
2. That's a billion. There's a $2 billion. So if you look back, starting at the year 2013, and you project forward to 2028, Duke Energy is in the middle of a $2 billion investment program in the Asheville region, which is primarily Buncombe County. There will be some things that happen on the kind of in some of our more rural communities like Madison County, but for sake of this conversation, these are generally speaking, these are Buncombe County investments that we're in the middle of. So if you think about that, you have $893 million of a new power plant. We're going to get to that in just a minute. You have about $60 million of what we know today in solar and in energy storage projects, and I believe that number will grow over time. You have about $168 million of transmission and distribution upgrades, also which we're going to talk about in just a minute. You have more than $500 million of just general grid investments that the company is beginning to make to ensure more reliability for customers, as well as to position us to accept more solar and other forms of distributed energy onto the grid, as well as cybersecurity investments. So if you think about some of the other things, about $422 million to excavate every scoop of coal ash away from the Asheville plant, about $25 million to actually retire the Asheville plant, $14 million in taxes since 2013 to last year. Then you can see some of those other contributions. And under Brownie's leadership and others, as well as other members of this commission, this Asheville City Council, of course, embarking on our journey with the Energy Innovation Task Force. To date, we don't have a number projected because we're still trying to figure out kind of what that looks like, but to date, the company's invested almost $600,000 in helping to do a lot of the research and analysis of the Energy Innovation Task Force. And in addition, I think I saw Corey here somewhere. Over the last 4 years, we've also invested about $170,000 into direct economic development activities into the region. I say all that, and that there is an enormous amount of work happening in our business in this region. So when you looked at the maps that Nate went through to look at growth, we are seeing that today at a higher rate. And when I say a higher rate, I'm talking about meters we are installing. We are installing meters at a faster rate than we were back in the 2006-2007 time. And so we are seeing an enormous amount of work. Anecdotally, we like to joke that Asheville is second behind our Charlotte operations centers for the amount of activity that our engineers are actually designing and building is happening here in this region. So we're in a growing market. We expect to grow over 15% over the next decade in energy use, and how we meet those demands are really important. So one of the things not everybody gets to see is the construction of a power plant. It's kind of hard to get back to it, to be honest with you, and there's a lot going on. So if you take out the next sheet, this is where we take a bit of a virtual tour. Y'all want one? You got one. Somebody else works in here. So if you think about the Asheville power plant, and is it okay if I stand up? This one was awkward to sit down. So this is what you see from Long Shoals Road. You're driving up to Bojangles, right? You look out and you see this beautiful power plant over across this magnificent lake. And you look out, especially at night, it looks like just this beautiful specimen of a power plant. Well, that's what you see is up here. What you don't see back behind the power plant, what you don't see back behind the power plant is a lot of stuff, right? At one point, there was roughly 10 million tons of coal ash that was being stored back behind the plant. That's in the process of being excavated. And so you'll see that activity going on right here. The coal ash is being excavated right there. This was the larger of the two coal ash basins that has now been fully excavated, and that's the site and the home of the new combined cycle natural gas power plant. So our good friends at PSNC, they come in from the south, they come into the plant, and they'll be able to serve all of this. You can see a lot of construction happening. When you're out there, the number of this is funny. We have more cranes on our power plant right now than they have in the downtown city of Asheville. It's pretty fantastic. Like I counted downtown Scott. I'm like, oh, we lost a couple of cranes, greasily downtown, so we now have more cranes at our power plant than are flying in downtown Asheville. The number of trucks and people that are employed, we have over 300 people on site now, and that number is going to grow throughout 2018 and into 2019, and we'll be spending about $900 million on that power plant. Retirement, so the timing of that plant will be built by the end of next year, and then we will retire the coal plant at the end of next, well, they're both kind of the end of next year, and then it'll take about 2 to 3 years for us to continue to excavate coal ash, to fully retire and demolish the existing coal-fired power plant. And if you look over here where you have coal ash being excavated and where the current coal plant is, that's actually going to be turned into a utility-scale solar farm at the time when everything's kind of off in the cycle. So there's a lot of stuff happening at the power plant. So, and one of the things that I have learned throughout this process, and this is just a separate picture that I wanted to give you, kind of gives you some of the detail around what's going on a little closer construction maybe. And so one of the things, can't miss this one, there's a little sheet of paper behind the really big sheets of paper that is easy to miss, but real quickly, so in thinking about the environmental benefits of retiring the coal plant and building a natural gas plant, we expect a reduction of about an additional reduction of 45% over what we've already reduced by the $300 million investment in the big tall scrubber that's out there now, which will no longer be needed. 45% reduction in nitrogen oxides, 99% reduction in sulfur dioxides, and 60% reduction in carbon dioxide per megawatt hour burn. Now this is where I'm going to yell. I know I'm here to talk to the commissioners, but I'm going to yell back to Josh O'Connor for a minute, because this is about Lake Julian, right? So Lake Julian, when we retire the coal plant, we start the combined cycle plants, we will completely eliminate the thermal impacts to Lake Julian. Right now, the water is warm when it enters the lake, and Lake Julian supports a healthy fishery of tilapia. It's a native species, you know, and in the mountains of western, it's not really. And so at some point in the future, as that starts to work, there will be a time when those fish can no longer sustain life in the lake, because it will return back to a cooler water lake, and more native species will hopefully return back to it. So,
the good news is about those of us that enjoy fishing, the bass will eat those tilapia, so.
that's right.
I like this, what it is, that's fish.
That's right. So I set the stage with that because what we're doing, what we're in the middle of doing in Buncombe County primarily, is we're in the middle of a $2 billion investment program here locally to provide cleaner electricity, more reliable electricity, and position this community for future growth in terms of electricity. But equally as important as to what we're doing is how we're doing it. So I've been here for 5 years, and one of the things that I have learned is the importance and value of conversation with those people you're going to have direct impacts with. So if you look at this piece of paper, right, it's the one with the big red line through the middle of it. I want to give you 2 examples. So one of the things that we did over the last 2 years is in working with the City of Asheville's River Arts District Transportation Improvement Project. It's hard for me to say. RADTIP. Y'all know what that is. So we had to move all of our big transmission towers. And so to do that, that was phase 1, and now we're in the process of moving it from the corner of Trade and Robert Street, White Duck Taco, for those of you who know what that is in the River Arts District, going up the MSD line into downtown and behind the U.S. Cellular Center. We're going to be having direct and explicit impact on customers' lives, right? We're going to be working behind their houses. We needed to remove some trees. We needed to do a lot of stuff. And so in the spirit of we want to listen and learn before we just act, we spent a lot of time in that neighborhood understanding and listening so that when we started work, we would have people that supported what we would do as opposed to not supporting. Kind of there's a slide that you put on there, the balance. We've learned the value and importance of listening, and that's been a really big deal. So that project is underway right now, and it's going exceedingly well. Knock on wood. Now, last update, because I can see I'm losing you. This is fun. Who here has heard that we're in the process of building an electrical substation in downtown Asheville that hasn't been built since the mid-'60s because we really need it to support the reliability of downtown Asheville? Who's heard? Raise your hands. Be proud. Be proud. We've all heard about it. Not being shoved to the ground over this thing. It's a big deal. So, going back to the principle of the importance of listening, right? So we purchased 4 parcels of property where we would buy the property and go into the community to explain what it is we were doing. And that was met with significant resistance. And so we decided to try a different approach. We worked with the neighborhood, the We Can neighborhood, and kind of the old Volvo dealership right on the corner of Patton Avenue. And so we worked with that neighborhood and some other leaders to talk about, to kind of set the stage on the problem we were trying to solve. So instead of bringing the solution to the community, we brought the problem to the community and allowed them, and gave them the opportunity to help us solve it. And so the next 3 sheets of paper, I need you to write draft on them because they're all drafted, none of them are final, and I don't want anybody to think they are, Jerry Rice. It's because they're not final. This is part of a conversation with the community. So when we started to design that substation, this is what we started with, okay? This is the Volvo dealership. You can see the substation takes up the entire thing, right? All roughly 5 acres of property. So as we started listening to the folks in the We Can neighborhood and other leaders in Asheville, they started sharing with us not what they wanted us to do, but why we should care about building in their neighborhood. And so that, oh wait a minute, where's the second one? Oh well, so there was another one. So that turned into a design that was more up in this area. And we started listening a little bit more, and we found out that this corner up here, the corner of Patton Avenue and Klingman, was exceedingly important to the We Can neighborhood feeling connected to Asheville. And by building a substation on there would really disrupt the various plans that had been laid out for Asheville. So, I'm hurrying, I promise, but this is just so good. So, this isn't finished. This is not a finalized plan. I want to be very clear because we are just now in the process of re-engaging that working group downtown to finalize our plans for this substation. But the thing that I've learned through all this, whether it's a foothills line, transmission line that goes all the way down 45 miles into the upstate of South Carolina, or a coal plant and retired to a gas plant, transmission lines being built downtown, or substations being built in a community, that those conversations and listening is exceedingly important in Asheville and Buncombe County. And so I'm delighted that we have been able to set a new standard for community engagement around joint problem solving with communities, and I'm hopeful that as we continue these conversations, we will turn this into a final plan that we can submit to the City of Asheville and others for their consideration and approval with advocates as opposed to advocates. That's all I have.
Good job. All right, and we will keep going, and then we'll if you have questions, then feel free to chime in and be conversation. All right, Chad, you next?
Yeah, all right. So Chad Pierce, the City of Asheville Water Department, and I'll just go over a little bit of what we have going on in terms of projects and our capital expenditures. Our current 5-year capital expenditure plan has us expending roughly $11 million a year on new water line and plant improvements to our infrastructure. That number was slightly elevated in the 17-18 budget cycle and was actually $50 million. And a lot of that is representative of a major project we have ongoing at our water treatment plant at Northport. And so what we had there was new regulations as far as what our spillway had to be able to handle during the maximum possible storm event. So the Dam Safety Act regulations required us to make some major upgrades to that spillway. And so what we're doing is we're actually adding some elevation to the dam, and that's being done by a curtain dam or a partition dam, where they go on top of the existing earthen structure and basically add a 4 foot of partition there to give us some extra storage volume. Complete reworking of the spillway is being moved. The old existing spillway is going to remain as an auxiliary spillway. Some of you might remember the old hunting cabin or rod and gun club that was on the property. So that's no longer there. Unfortunately, that was demolished as part of this. They took out, it was elevated on a hill, and they took out a lot of that material, removed it to bring it down in front of the existing dam to reinforce it, to help support the new elevation. And the spillway, a new spillway is being added to design. It's much wider and larger, so it's got a larger capacity there. And they're going to use, so the old traditional spillway gates that were operated as recently as 2004 with a wheel and a chain. They had to send somebody out there to turn it to raise the gates, and during the hurricane events of 2004, we discovered that was a bad idea, as the poor operator was, out in the pouring storm trying to raise the gates to save the dam. So they did convert that over to a motor-controlled device. But now we're going to what is called a fuse gate. And it's a really interesting concept. There's no thought that goes into it as far as operation. There's nothing that you raise or lower. It's based to fail. So what happens is when the water elevations get so high into the reservoir, those gates, they start to fail to release water down the spillway. And the whole thing is designed basically to keep the dam from being overtopped and to save the dam. But it takes out, it's designed up front, and it takes out any type of human decision or possible error at the time of an event. So that was a major expenditure. It's ongoing. The bulk of the construction started last December in 2017. You guys might have heard some information or seen the notices about us doing blasting, because the bulk of the project is just earthwork. So it's moving a mountain down to where the dam used to be. So there's a lot of blasting that goes on there. A lot of that's being coordinated and communicated through the Black Mountain, town of Black Mountain. Their folks and their residents are the ones that are dealing with the majority of that impact. Currently, I'm managing 4 major water line distribution projects. Each one of those represents about $5 million, so that's about a total of $20 million of water line replacements. And then throughout the next 4 years, the bulk of our CIP budget is geared toward those type of distribution system projects. So like I said, roughly $11 million a year. Some money going toward other plant improvements, just keeping it upgraded. One thing that's important to know about our capital improvement plan is we do not extend new lines. So all this money that we're spending is just upkeep for our existing infrastructure. We go through a process on a yearly basis, and we use a lot of maps like Nate had in his presentation, heat maps, and different things to identify our problem areas. Some key factors that we utilize to determine where our water lines need to be replaced. So anytime there's a break and our maintenance crews go out to fix a break, it's recorded through our workflow system. There's cost and things that are put into that, so they try to record, how many man hours, what was our total cost to fix this break, and all that is captured. We also look at places where we've had to deny water availability. So like Nate mentioned in his presentation, the first step for a new development, whether it be a single-family home or a new 200 home subdivision or a new commercial development, is that water availability. So as we go through those and we look at our lines, we see if they can support new development. If they can't, unfortunately, those water availabilities get denied. And we capture that information on where those occur and the frequency of those. And then every year we take that data and some other data that we have, so the age of our infrastructure, so we kind of are anticipating where those breaks are going to start showing up, like how old the pipes are. We also have a lot of older neighborhoods within the city limits, within the county, where the water lines were originally undersized. It might have started off with some 2-inch water lines within the neighborhood. They can't support fire flows and things of that nature. Got a lot of neighborhoods with 4-inch water lines, and it's a lot better than 2, but it still has, we still have a hard time of providing fire flow and things like that with those lines. Now, minimum standard for a water line extension is a 6-inch water main. So you have to have at least a 6-inch water main to support a fire hydrant to provide fire protection and things. So that's one of our other priorities, is to look at that smaller size infrastructure, where all of our 2-inch stuff is, 4-inch stuff, and try to attack that too. So basically, we boil that down every year and bring in that data and look to see where our greatest needs are, where our most problematic water lines are, where those water lines that can't provide, we can't have additional connections to those, and those are the ones that we improve. We're blind to jurisdictional boundaries. We don't care. Those water lines, we serve the county, we serve the city, we serve parts of northern Henderson County. So we don't care about where the political boundaries are. We look at where the need is to improve water infrastructure. Because our mission statement is to provide safe drinking water to all of our citizens, and to do that in the most reliable and sustainable method possible. So we want to make sure that things that are getting built, as we build these new lines, we're not just doing it, we're doing it in a manner where it's going to eliminate the possibility of breaks in the future, and our costs for continuing maintenance of those lines is cost us the least possible. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Sorry I didn't have supplemental slides. I kind of was thrown into this last second. They're having an important budget meeting over at the city today, so I was asked to fill in. But in a nutshell, that's kind of our capital projections. That's what we have going on. They hit on some of the hot spots. We definitely were pre-recession numbers now as far as the number of water availabilities and permit requests and stuff that we're seeing come in. We're seeing a substantial amount of growth in South Asheville along the Brevard corridor. That's ripe with new large-scale apartment complexes. It seems like that's where the bulk of those are going. We're seeing a few of those scattered north. I think New Bridge, there was a pretty large one that went in. And a lot of these zombie projects we're seeing now being realized. We have a lot of conversations with developers. We're seeing some of our common players, the folks with Biltmore Lake, the Cliffs Developments. They hadn't really been doing a lot of new development inside of their areas. The Ramble, Biltmore Lake, Cliffs at Walnut Cove, South Cliff for a while, but those are now starting to definitely ramp back up. One of the big differences that we're seeing is when they used to come in and have a 100-lot subdivision proposed as one phase, there's coming in much smaller. So now they're coming in 20 lots at a time, 30 lots at a time, and a little bit smaller footprints. Lot sizes, I think, and they probably can speak a lot more to this, but it seems like the lot sizes have decreased from what they used to be. But we are definitely seeing some ramp up of those. We're currently underway with a master plan. The last one we did started in 2004. It was officially completed in 2007, but most of that information and data had been collected prior to the recession, and a lot of that involves projection for population growth and some other things. So of course with the recession, that wasn't realized. They had us slated for the need for a new water treatment plant in 2025, and that's obviously not going to happen now. But we're curious. It's pretty interesting to see what the results of this newest master plan is going to be. If the growth speculations are the same. At the 2005, there were a lot of anticipated growth in the Cane Creek area. It's a nice valley. Lots of open farmland that's kind of ripe for development. And so it's interesting to see if that trend continues, if they're projecting that that's going to be one of the areas, the next areas of large amount of growth here. And also when they think we're going to run out of water supply, we're going to need some additional water supply. So
But the water supply is currently be quite robust, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's not any,
Our daily demand is right around 18 to 20 million gallons a day, depending on what season we're in. And our safe yield capacity with our 3 plants is near 40 million gallons a day. So we're about 50%.
So any of the developments that don't get approved due to water limitations, it's not the supply, it's the pipe delivery infrastructure.
You nailed it. Yeah, it's not necessarily how much we have to supply, but it's what infrastructure is available right there adjacent to that. And a lot of times that's limited by our size of our infrastructure. So, somebody might want to try to build a large commercial development, and there's only a 6-inch water line there that can only supply so many gallons at the required pressure. So they have to look at upsizing that infrastructure to a point back where there's larger transmission mains to be able to supply those.
All right, let's keep going. All right, Cole.
Well, I guess with DOT, our mission is to provide infrastructure that can serve all modes of traffic safely and efficiently. As you know, as you drive around Asheville, I'm sure you can tell that all our infrastructure is not up to the level of service that we'd all like it to be. But we do have a lot of projects underway. We have a surplus of money, and the Secretary and the Governor and all has directed us to accelerate these projects as much as we can. And so we have done so. In that measure to try to address that, they've also pushed a lot of these projects out to the division offices to manage the planning and design of the projects. And to do that coordination with the counties and the municipalities. So that's what I've been handling and overseeing, is the managing of those projects through the design process. And we have quite a few projects here in Buncombe County. I mean, the major projects that we're looking at, as you know, is the I-26 connector projects. There's a B, A, B, and a C. B being right around Patton Avenue. And C is the large intersection of 26 and 40. And both of those projects have been funded, so we're moving forward with those. Trying to finish up the planning phase and get our documents together. The section in the middle, West Asheville, has not been funded yet. It is in our spot process to be scored this time. If we can get everyone to support it and put points on it, hopefully we can get it funded and also construct that center section along with the B and C section. It did not score well enough in our statewide scoring system to be funded through the statewide system. There are 3 tiers: statewide, the regional, and the division. So we're going to have to pick it up somewhere, either in the regional or division, to get it scored high enough and get it funded. Along with that, more I-26. There's some projects, A10 up to the north to widen the future I-26. There are also projects coming up very soon on the south side of Asheville on I-26, widening from the intersection, the interchange with I-40 all the way down into Henderson County on the other side of Upward Road. So Buncombe County is broken down into 3 sections, but we're going to let Buncombe County as one contract. It's supposed to be let out to construction in 2019, that widening in Buncombe County. Other major projects we're working on is I-4759 Libby Road interchange. That's going to probably open up an area of growth once that interchange is built. Also over in Black Mountain at Blue Ridge. We're proposing a new interchange at that site, which is gonna help the commercial industry get access to the interstate and take some of that traffic out of Black Mountain and potentially open up some more road. Other arterials around Asheville and Buncombe County that's in the process is, we've got a project going to widen Sweet Creek Road from NC 280 to Rock Hill, where it's already widened. Part of that's, in the city and the county. NC 191, Brevard Road from the Arboretum, all that entire corridor into Henderson County. But the section from the Arboretum to just south of Long Shoals has been funded, and we're working on widening that corridor in the planning phase now.
What's your timeline on
On 191, we're looking to let it to construction in 2023.
that? And Sweet Creek?
Sweet Creek is 2022. So, a lot of these interstate projects, the widening is gonna be let in 2019. The B and C of the connector sections are gonna be let in 2020 right now. So the next few years, there's gonna be a lot of construction going on. And, so. And there are a lot of other Buncombe County projects. Let's see. Big ones is Sardis Road, wide Sardis Road from 191 over to.
What's the date of that? What's the current date on that?
Let's see if I can find that. There's not many roads around there that we're not working on. I think it's looks like construction right now, 2025.
Okay.
Let's see, other major arteries. Swananoa River Road, we're looking to look at Swananoa River Road from Biltmore Avenue all the way through till it ties into Tunnel Road. Those are two separate projects. That's the main arteries. I mean, if there's anything in particular someone had questions about, but yeah, there's a lot of planning going on, and I think you'll see that that'll continue. I think our spot, completing our spot process, our scoring for our projects for this time at the end of this year, so there'll be additional projects coming up in that. But if there's anything of particular interest anyone has, we can answer those too.
We get those questions all the time about, when the roads are gonna be, started, completed. We get a lot of emails about roads, and I'm trying to think how we could tie that information to the website or something to where we could actually answer these questions from folks. So, if it's, Sweet Creek, Sardis Road, 191, from any District 3, I get just hammered all the time. Emails, which is fine, it's part of the job, but you could be able to have an approximate idea of when these things are going to be done that you could actually send people to, but it doesn't matter if you're emails or if you're shipping emails. These are really big, important projects.
And all of these projects are shown on our website, the State Transportation Improvement Program, so they can look it up online.
Pretty easy to navigate.
Yeah, it's not hard, but there too, we're available, you know, you can call me, or our division office, and we've got people that can assist with that. There are also a lot of these larger projects, interstate projects, there are individual websites for each of those larger projects.
Stone, I bet we could figure out a way to connect, you know, the people when they come in here to connect them to specific, you know, specific spots. I mean, we're looking at the website right now.
You Google Live, STIP, we update that every month, so if there's any changes made to the TIP program, those are updated every month on there. So you may not know if the lead date of the project is accelerated, that it reflects those changes monthly.
Because of the growth is, you know, probably outside of some of the, you know, opioid issues, some of the other issues, you know, we're working on when you're out, you know, and public growth is probably the biggest thing that's going to be really what we want to do, how we're going to handle it. Yeah, they, you know, they want you to have an answer. We don't have all of them, but if we don't, we want to be able to point them to the right direction in an easy way.
Yeah.
You know, so, yeah, it's a pretty cool site.
And there too, like I said, some of the larger ones, they have their own little website, like the I-26 connector. You can just type in I-26 connector on Google, and it'll pull those projects up.
I think the planning department would be a good conduit for sort of, you know, I sit around one, and it's a really good graphic representation, because, you know, everybody sees y'all's codes, and they're like, oh, the U2 596 are okay. So, but I'll tell you what was really helpful was when y'all sent out, like, and I'd send it to the commissioners and the senior leadership team. It was a graphic representation that gave that segment, and it showed it along, and that might have been through Land to Sky too, where it showed this segment is the one that's gonna be widened on 26. If we could have like a portal work with you guys on something that, you know, if we can provide a direct link and someone was just to wander around planning, because we get called about the craziest things. But that might be something we could reformulate once we do our website upgrade. If you guys think that'd be something that we should look into, we'd be more than happy to help out there.
Yeah, we just need to be able to quickly answer those questions for the public, you know, and if whether we forward it, you know, as a commissioner, we forward it to the planning department or wherever, and then they answer them back, you know, copying us so that they know that, you know, we've actually responded. We just get a lot.
And
They need to know, I mean, they know, even though that date's gonna change, it always changes, you know, but they need to know that at least those things are actually being worked on.
And, you know, if we can help you find those websites, we have a division planning engineer, his name is Brendan Merrithew. I can get him to assist you. And the planning branch is also hiring another engineer for our division.
We're hiring work for there.
We haven't quite filled that position, but it's not far away. So we'll have a couple people here that can assist you and get to know that, finding those locations and website, and get something set up.
I think they'll make them the Land to Sky.
If you get any questions concerning DOT and you don't know where to send them, please send them to my office, the district office. We will gladly chase down anything and assist you guys with information any way possible. So please don't hesitate to call me or email me or call my office. We'll be glad to get you, assist you in any way we can to get that information for you.
So I'll say this since y'all are in the room, since I've been a commissioner, which is about 6 years, 100% of the time that I've called the DOT with a community issue, y'all have responded it, and in almost all cases, fixed it very quickly, whether it was a bad place in the road, or there was a bad culvert out in Chandler, just different things that's, you know, and so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, guys. Hey, before we move on to Erica, so there's a question on whether we're going to take a break. Here's what I'd like to suggest, because we've got a lot of ground to cover. Why don't we just kind of keep going, but if folks need to know, some folks have stepped out, need to take a restroom break or something, let's just do that as you need to, so we kind of keep everything moving, okay? All right, great. Eric, coffee.
Thanks for having us. I have a few slides that are in the handout that we passed out, but it's basically just informational, so let's talk about some of our programming. We have, overall, our mission is to provide assistance across multiple jurisdictions. We have 21 jurisdictions we work with. It's predominantly 4 counties and all the municipalities within those. We also work with Haywood County and those municipalities for the transportation planning review and specific other projects. So predominantly, our 3 programs are the AAA, so the Area Agency on Aging, the Workforce Development Board, and Economic Community Development. So there are 3 departments right there. And one of our purviews is we are the Economic Development District through the Economic Development Administration. That's the U.S. Department of Commerce. And we're also with the Appalachian Regional Commission, we're the League Development District for the region, which basically means we're a partner and we provide direct technical assistance to all of our local governments within our region. So that's one of the major responsibilities with that is doing the comprehensive economic development strategy. And that's a regional look at what are the priorities, what are the trends, what do we see coming down the road. And right now, those priorities are broadband, affordable housing, workforce solutions, so workforce training programs, and transportation and other types of infrastructure. So water, sewer, we're seeing everyone's talking aging systems and a lot of growth and needing to address those. So I'll talk about one of the projects right now is the high-speed broadband access in West Engine. And this is a project that started, I think, a couple of years ago. And it started by the Hub in Asheville, working with NC State University and Marquette and the Next Generation Network project in the Raleigh area. Hearing what they're doing, trying to attract high-speed broadband to that area. So the next step was a small group was pulled together, and that's Phil Cedarberg, and Phil's here in the room. Phil Cedarberg is our chair of the program. He's our super volunteer, and Stag Newman, who's also a super volunteer, who's worked for the FCC. So we have some technical experts. Hunter Goosen with ERC is part of the group, the Asheville Buncombe Chamber of Commerce, and UNCA, and Otis Brown here at NC State University as well. So that kind of steering committee sparked 6 municipalities to band together, put some money in a pot, and hire a consultant. We were asked to coordinate and facilitate that process. And the municipalities are Asheville, Biltmore Forest County, and Waynesville, Hendersonville, Fletcher, and Laurel Park. And they follow kind of the broadband lines, the trunk lines that are coming through, as well as the major interstates. So to start with those, we put together an RFN, as it is, request for negotiations, which was a new one for me. And basically put it out there, and we've had some good responses. We had 6 respondents, broadband providers. Some are already in the area here, like Charter, AT&T, and some are new. So we're currently in negotiations with 2 new ones that would be new to the area. And what do they need, what do our municipalities need, and trying to find that middle ground. Some of the major takeaways through this process that we found is we need to really help that private-public partnership take root. North Carolina doesn't allow counties or municipalities to operate broadband infrastructure. So we have to find creative ways to have broadband in our more rural, less densely populated areas where the return on investment's not there for companies. And so this, taking what we've learned now, we have a small grant from ARC, the Appalachian Regional Commission, to take this engine to the next phase, which is to start working with all the communities within the 4-county region and the counties themselves, to start looking at what the priorities are, where we need targeted service for broadband, and start looking at what those hubs are, those priorities, and what we can do to address if we need to seek funding, if we need to work directly with some of the providers to see how we can make those connections. And some of the reasons we're looking at broadband is we're hearing from our Chamber of Commerce or economic developers about the need for those, it's a new term to me, but the tech nomads, people who can work out of their homes, they want to bring their work here for the quality of life, but there's no broadband, so they need higher speed access, reliant, lower cost service that they can't find in a lot of these communities they want to move to. It's also a tool for our smaller communities who want to have a more robust Main Street or downtown, like Black Mountain and Weaverville and these places that in order to build up those areas, they need a strong broadband system. So it's kind of the critical infrastructure of the future, the broadband. And telehealth is also a emerging issue for our more rural areas where the services might be pulling back, but smaller institutions are coming in, or doctors' offices, and wanting to be able to provide those services directly. And then there's the digital divide for kind of our communities that lack the service. There's a real trend in trying to pay attention to children in education systems, as well as adults who are pursuing certifications or continuing education. I hear a lot of stories about people having to drive in and park at McDonald's so they can do their homework. So those types of things we're trying to address so that people have to do that. So this effort, I see it being a longer term, but we have made some great progress in trying to get have more very clear communications and kind of hard conversations about what does need to be put on the table to bring providers here. So those are overall the broadband project in a very small nutshell. And switching gears a little bit to touch base on, Nate asked me to touch base on transportation a little bit as well, is we host the, within Land of Sky and the Economic Community Development Department is the MPO and the RPO, so the Metropolitan Planning Organization and the Rural Planning Organization. And basically that's our regional transportation planning. We partner very closely with the DOT, and many of the folks in the room here are involved in all levels of it. So Chair Newman is on our RPO board, as well as our MPO board, and Commissioner Beach-Guerra is on that as well, and Commissioner Presley is our alternate, and then Matt Cable and Josh O'Connor is our chair of the staff level, the technical committee, and Matt Cable sits on both MPO and the RPO technical coordinating committee. So it's a large team effort of partnerships in order to program a lot of funding for the transportation projects in the region. And right now we have $608 million in projects programmed in the next 4 years, so FY 18 to 21. And That includes bicycle, pedestrian, roadways, greenways, public transportation, all encompassing. The main responsibility of the MPO is to put together the metropolitan planning, or the transport, they changed the name, Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And basically that's a 20-year plan for the region for transportation. And we're in the process now of starting the modeling and looking at all the impacts for the next iteration. It's kind of an ongoing process. And the MPO has specific responsibilities under with Federal Transit Administration as well as federal highways to call for projects for specific pots of money related to public transportation and other transportation networks, so bicycle, pedestrian, and transportation. So it's kind of a mix of things that the MPO and RPO are responsible for. And I'm sure you all have gotten a notice, is it 4400, the I-26 corridor from Henderson to I-40, that public meeting is next Monday at the Biltmore Baptist Church. I wanted to remind you all of that. I think that's all I have. Oh, I'm sorry. The public transportation side of life, we do administer the Mount Mobility side of, not the operations side, but we partner with Buncombe County to do that. And I think we have since 2011, 2012. And work directly with Matt and administering that program. That's mainly the billing, validation of trips, kind of maintaining and managing the different grant streams. And then we also, for DHHS for the county, we administer and operate the non-emergency Medicaid transportation program. Yes, I'm sorry.
This is going back a few minutes. I just wanted to make sure I understood. You said that under state law, counties and municipalities can't operate broadband, but it sounds like they can participate in public-private partnerships. Is that?
I'm going to look Hunter for this, but I think, as I understand the law, they cannot operate it, but they can put money into infrastructure as long as another entity operates it.
Specifically, cities can't. It's very gray as for counties, but participating in a public-private partnership are definitely things that are available to them.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
So you driving, Nate?
You'll just look at me when you're there.
Okay. All right. Paul, thank you for inviting us, and actually thank you for your service in general, and thank you for your service to MSD. We have many board members, current, Alan Frost, Belcher, Brownie, served a short time with us, and we're Presley currently. And Jim. I look forward to working with Jim. He's a new board member, and I look forward to being a colleague and with you. Wanted to inform you a little bit about our approach towards the development by way of history. I think it's necessary. I guess our mission pretty much is the first statement there. We were formed back in '62 by state statute as a special district to collect and treat wastewater and eliminate the discharges to the surrounding rivers. Prior to that, at that time really, all the lines, the stormwater lines and the sanitary sewers were all tied together and ran to the river. And there were a bunch of outfalls along the river, and that's the way it was done, because the solution to pollution was dilution. So you just run it all to the river, and you know, for sparsely populated areas, the river has an assimilable capacity and can ecologically take care of that. But as you get denser environments, you have to add technology to really speed up the biological process. So that's generally where we're coming from, and between 62 and 89, we built 100 miles worth of the trunk sewers and the treatment plant. At that time, it was a 25 million gallon a day plant, and began treating in 68. We upgraded that plant to a 40 million gallon per day treatment plant in the mid-1990s. Also in the 1990s, what we call sewer consolidation, many local governments and special districts gave us their collection lines to take care of. MSD at that time assumed another 720 miles of the smaller feeder lines, which were in really poor condition, broken down clay and even cardboard pipe were part of the benefits there. Next slide. These were the districts that all came together. So you have the municipalities to the left, add Woodfin in the last few years. But to the right, you have 9 special districts and then Woodfin at the bottom. The 9 above are what the county board members, the 3 are representatives on the board, are representing. Those are the districts that came into MSD at the time. And so that's out in the county. And that's how we come with the 12-member board. Most of the folks on the left-hand side have representation, and the county has 3 representatives to handle those. Next slide. This is a picture of the district. As Nate was showing us, a cross. Ours looks more like an amoeba. The French Broad pretty much flows south, north through there. Up near the top, you'll see a big yellow box. That's the, well, not in this picture, but the yellow box up there near the top is our treatment plant up in Woodfin. And so most of the district can get by gravity to the plant, theoretically. There are many pump stations, about 30 pump stations for various and sundry areas that need pumping. Particularly Weaverville to the north has to pump back down to the plant. Next slide. Collections system overview. 180 square mile service area. Just in general, that's a much larger, we're a very spread out area in Buncombe County as compared to, say, Charlotte or Winston-Salem or Greensboro, as far as the amount of people in the particular area. And so, because of in the 1920s, they thought this was going to be the Charlotte, and so they ran lines pretty much everywhere. And since taking over the collection lines in 1990, we've spent about $324 million replacing about 1 million feet of sewer mains, which is about 25% of the system. One thing I have to plug here is our operations staff. We created a first response team. We track our response times, and 2016, and this is fairly typical of all years. It takes 31 minutes for a person to be out at your door if you have a sewer problem of any sort, which is pretty important. There's not only environmental portion of that, there's also a public health. People are in trouble, and backing up sewer, you want somebody there in 30 minutes. So we try to keep that up. Next slide there. Capital improvement program. We have a capital improvement program committee that was put together at consolidation when all the entities came together. And at first, when everybody was giving us their smaller lines, they brought their requests to MSD and say, this is what we envision and these are where our problems are. As time goes on, and we've had them for 25, 30 years, we pretty much are operating, we know where all the problems are, but we still bring the entities in to give it the smell test and get the support from the community and make sure that we're addressing all those types of needs. And so on that, we bring that together once a year, and they vote on the capital budget for the next year and look at approve our 10-year CIP as well. We spent a lot of money there. We try to replace about 50,000 feet a year of sewer mains, about 1% of the system. So that's where we're spending a lot of money. Next slide. This is how we've rated so far in terms of SSOs, and the rehab program has really significantly lowered the amount of SSOs. We had a lot of, and SSOs are sanitary sewer overflows, backups that go into streams and that type of thing. The red portion on there, the French Broad, was recently reclassified from Class C to Class B recreation, just downstream of our discharge from the plant. But a lot of this has to do with the amount of money that we're respending in the rehab program for our sewer lines. Future growth and potential, much like with water, our plant rating is at 40 million gallons a day. That's what our permitted capacity is, but we're currently running about 20, which is about half of that. However, the plant was built in the 60s, rebuilt in the 80s, and we're rebuilding now. We're basically doing open heart surgery on our plant right now, and we will be for the next 6 to 8 years. We don't have the luxury that Jason has with a lot of room. We're between a cliff and a river. We got to keep the plant running and treating. At the same time, we replace process by process with new technology. So that's what we're in the midst of now. We're spending about $100 million going over the next 10 years for that plant rehab, in addition to keep rehabbing all these sewer lines. I'm going to talk about our master plan and how that provides growth, or provides for growth. But when we rehab lines, we rehab them for a size for future development, so that it will take care of a larger basin whenever we rehab a line. And we do have a master plan, which I'll talk about in a second. This is where we're spending the money over the next 10 years. Used to be, at first it was on interceptors, then it was on collection, and now it's a healthy portion of all three that we're doing now. But as you can see, I just wanted to put that number up there. That's $308 million. I was talking about the 324 in 25 years. We're doing this in 10 years. So that just goes to show you, the type of reinvestment that we're doing now because of a nexus of our plant getting older and having to rehab it, and the growth that's going to happen. So we're designing everything for the beyond the 50-year horizon. So that's important. Okay, collection system master plan. This was for the lines. The collection system are the lines, and that's usually where you hit the development. They really don't care about the plant, although we do in general. We have to take care of it, but the lines are sort of where the rubber hits the road. So back in 2008, we had a collection system master plan formed, and it incorporated the new Buncombe County land use plan zoning ordinance, and incorporated all the other member agencies, all the other towns, City of Asheville, and all the other smaller towns, their planning and zoning efforts as well. Basically, it provided for the orderly growth of the sewer system. And one important point there at the bottom is that we currently we don't construct speculative lines. We don't pay for expansion. We partner with developers, but we're not going to go out and run a line out into Blue Yonder speculatively and see, build it and they will come type of thing. We're not going to pick winners and losers. So, but we will partner with developers if they do come in. Next slide. Just to kind of give you a visual, this is our GIS snapshot. That's our GIS showing our existing lines. This is just one area out west, for example. These are existing lines in green. And then the next slide there, those are the additional lines that our master plan identified where we would expand and how we would expand. Well, why do we go through this exercise way ahead of time? Well, when a developer comes in, we want to be able to tell them, okay, well, this is the line you're going to have to run, and this is the size it's going to be. And why are they in those spots? Well, gravity. You want to make the system flow by gravity, so you don't minimize the amount of pump stations. Pump stations are going to happen, but you want to minimize them, and so that's why they're flowing along all the tributaries there. And so that, when a developer comes in, after they've gotten approval from Buncombe County, they come to us and say, well, what's necessary? And we show them this. And then they start taking a look at the cost and that type of thing, and they start working that into their pro forma. Next slide. So that's where we do partner with developers when they come in. We will, for the larger lines, the larger interceptor trunk lines, we will provide design services, right-of-way services, and financial contributions. So if a developer was going to run a line to their development and they only need an 8-inch and a 16-inch was required for the entire basin, we'll pay the differential cost for the 8-inch to the 16-inch and we'll require them to do it right. And then when another developer comes on, we'll charge them a pro rata rate of what the original developer had put into it, just to try to facilitate that. Because back before the recession, there were a lot of people, or at this recession, a lot of people were just waiting for another guy to run the line and they tie on and that type of thing and take advantage of somebody else's capital outlay. So we do provide that service to pro rata share those. We do have an economic development fee waiver for industries employing over 200 people, or an existing industry expanding by 200 people, or discharging 1 million gallons a month. We'll waive their tie-on fee. And finally, but not least, the affordable housing rebates. We rebate 70% of the tie-on fees for affordable housing developments. These are three projects that were recent: Greens Creek Interceptor, and their identified growth out there, the West French Broad Interceptor, which is that workforce housing off of Long Shoals Road. We had to run an interceptor down to that. And Olivet, which is just north of Woodfin. These are three developments that have done recently. Again, we are participating in those. And they asked me to put in an ugly slide, like the Fatberg that happened in London and their big tunnels. We don't have, our largest slide is 66 inch, so I couldn't show you a Fatberg. But this is Greece coming out of a healthcare facility that has food preparation. All this to say is Greece is bad to put down the systems by public service announcement. Please, if you're cooking with grease, when you're done, pour it in a can, stick it under the sink, let it cool off, and then send it to Jim, solid waste. So you don't clog up the sewer, because the sewers are just like our arteries. They'll clog up just as easily. And the final one is our website. Please, I encourage people to come down and have a tour of the plant, because it's very interesting, and particularly when we have it all wide open. But there's a virtual tour on our website too of the plant if you don't want to know it.
I have to make a plug for MSD. I'm on a lot of boards, but the efficiency, the capability, probably the taxpayers, the customer service is extraordinary, really extraordinary. And, you know, from people having illegal, for lack of a better word, sewage in their own house, how they deal with everybody is amazing, and equanimity is really to be followed in everything.
Thanks, Tommy. Great. Great week.
All right, here we are.
You guys are
Thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm going to give you a little history, and then we'll let Mike present our 2 slides. Just 2. We started providing natural gas to this area in 1954. We've seen tremendous growth, obviously, since that time. About 3 years ago, we looked at our infrastructure and the pipes that we had coming up the mountain from connecting to Transcontinental Pipeline in Mill Springs. And we realized that in order to be able to grow at the rates we've been growing, we would need to do some things to upgrade that infrastructure in order to serve this area for the next 20, 25 years at least. So we embarked on some major pipeline construction projects. So Mike, I'm going to let Mike Lewis, our regional engineer, kind of present this as to what these look like. You're going to have to look that way, I think.
I hope it's okay to stand. I'll have to stand.
Yeah.
Thanks for that great slide. Yeah, that.
Give me a second.
Okay.
Mike, do you want to preach? Do you want this one first?
No, I would like this one first. And for those that can't see past my head, sorry. First of all,
I do want to say it's an honor to be here. Like some of you here, I'm a lifelong resident of Buncombe County. And I'm an Inca Jet through and through. I know that there's some folks over here that are Inca Jet. And but to see the thought and care and the horsepower, the intellect that's gathered here is very exciting. It makes you feel good that, hey, Buncombe County's fine. We're going to do great. Now, I'm the new man with PSNC, and so they say, guess what you get to do? And so this is what I'm going to do. Yeah, let's go to the next one. Make the one that's kind of far out. This is our major gas line. This is the T1 line that is going up into Asheville. And as you can see, it extends on west towards Cherokee. And then also, if you don't look at this parcel, somehow you have to put that out of your mind. You see it loops around to Marion. One of our concerns early on, again 3 years ago or so, was the fact that this is a single feed into Asheville. And I can rely on Chad to verify. One thing you don't want is a single feed going anywhere. You want to have a loop. So we are in the process of designing a 35-mile connector that starts in Forest City and goes to Marion. That's what the new guy gets to do. It gets mature when we get involved in it. But in any event, that gives us a loop. It gives us more efficient flow of our gas. If we have a problem at some point, we can backfeed. This is important. For Asheville in particular, we now have a 2-feed system that comes in case something goes wrong along the way. Otherwise, we were in a bit of a bind. So we didn't want that to happen. So that's where we are. This is being built, has to be built by the end of 2019. So at the end of 2019, we will have a full loop for the western part of North Carolina. And we can go to the next slide. Part of that, as you know, we're bringing gas into the Duke Power Plant. And if you will look in your packets, we created a slide for everyone to show where we're starting. Our graphics people produced this.
We'll send you the bill.
Jason, thanks. I was like, man, we're using that. So our folks created about 5 minutes ago. Where you see this construction, we're pulling off the line that we're calling T72. Now, fortunate for some of us that live in the Cameron area, this is going to be going right down Bard Road. So what you see at this point, this is a corridor we're surveying right now. We're talking with landowners. We're trying to find the most efficient way to run the line, keep it as short as possible, to be good stewards of our money, public's money. We want to make sure that all of this is a good design. So we're at the design stage. However, this has to be in place very soon. It goes from the Duke Power Plant to the Inca AV Tech site. So those of you who saw that go in where we bored under the railroad, that's where we're tying in. That's a new substation. From that point, it goes from being our T72 line. These are just random numbers that get produced by the computer. It connects to the line that goes out to Cherokee. So now Cherokee has a better feed, a more substantial feed that's going out to the western part of the state. So T72 involves a 12-inch line, which is a large pipeline, and we want to go as much off corridor, off of roadways, cross country as we can. However, there are places where you just can't do that, and so you do have to get onto the road. Most of the folks at the panel table here we work with closely and have a good relationship with, even Troy. And we, I'm not going to say that because I actually had something I talked to Troy about later. But so now Troy's good too. But that's where our T72 line is going. So this will allow us to have more gas, a steadier, more reliable gas feed into the city of Asheville.
Question.
Yes.
Slide, I think it's before this one. Yeah, I think, so the main gas line is on the north side of I-40.
Yes.
Going to Clyde.
Yes.
Why didn't it go on the north side of I-40 when everybody lives on the south side of
I can't answer. That was long before I got there, but A lot of that has to do with, at that time, what was being built, where the needs were at that time. Don, maybe you can address that on the league.
I know that line, when it was run to Kent, back in the early sixties, it was run cross-country because it was a large size transmission line, similar to what Mike's talking about with the T-72 line. So there wasn't, I guess at the time, I don't know that there was a residential service reason why we ran that line.
Yeah.
You know, that was in the early sixties.
He was trying to get the Kansas.
Okay.
Yeah, he was trying to get,
Trying to get to the plant, trying to get to the plant.
Trying to get the paper plant,
Trying to get
right,
the paper
exactly.
plant. Okay, so now that makes sense. So now you're at the Inca red light. What's the plans for coming on out west?
We're simply tying into that same line that's going out west.
So I'm talking about south of I-40. I mean, hey, is there? Natural gas? Yeah.
South of County, we're actually feeding off of
Sardis Road right now into part of that, and we also have stations along Sand Hill Road feeding that direction. But we also have, you know, here we have the Blue Ridge Parkway, we have the Pisgah National Forest, we have a lot of areas that we just can't get into.
Yeah, but between that, between the Pisgah National Forest and exit and the Inca Light, there's a zillion big, somewhere under a zillion.
Well, we had it close to zero.
It's close. So you went to Inca, so you know what a zillion is.
I take the shoes off. Yeah.
And we do have some service out
I hear that
in
all
those
the time,
areas.
that's why I'm bringing it up. I mean, I hear it all the time about getting gas, the gas out in that area.
I mean, we serve the Candlestick, we're not that far in the county now. on
Not
that
at
side.
51 at all, right?
In Candler, yes, but not out, extending out where people know
So just a question on the new line. So there's the line from Forest City to Marion, that's all brand new. It's a brand new connection.
Absolutely.
From Marion to Black Mountain to Asheville, that's an existing
Correct.
line. And so in terms of the Duke combined cycle project, that's being made possible because of the line from Forest City to Marion? I guess I'm still a little unclear. What's the capacity expansion that allows the combined cycle plant to have enough fuel?
2 new lines.
We did, what's been put in so far, this line from there all the way to the actual plant, we put in 76 miles of new pipe. We have a 24-inch line that runs from Forest City, Kings Mountain to.
Just parallel to the existing line.
Right.
It's an expansion of that that's really going to
Right,
provide.
but there's actually 2 lines that went in.
Yeah, that's,
We actually ran 2 parallel lines through that corridor to increase capacity. This just increases reliability.
thanks. All right, other natural gas questions? All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Jason, thank you for the slide.
You're welcome. Anything else?
Thank you all.
I did have one other question, just maybe for Tom, actually. So, and I'm sure Joe and Robert, you guys hear this question from time to time too, and probably know a lot more about it than I do. But I hear people asking about just asking about natural gas extensions out in the Inca and Candler area. So I also hear that question come up periodically with MSD. So, so Tom, you're saying the policy is, MSD's not going to speculatively expand the system. You kind of want to invest your resources in taking care of the system we have, and if developers come in, then you can kind of partner. But so I guess 2 questions. One is on the Inca Candler area specifically. I've heard people talk about their feasibility studies having been done in the past, or maybe they should be done in the future. I've never been totally clear on what's been done or not done, but I guess to first to clarify that, have there been some feasibility studies done of expansions in that area? I've heard this one idea of like going all the way to Canton, but I think really the goal from folks in that area is to just get more extensions out into the, that area of Buncombe County.
We did, I think it was Michelle Wood who was inquiring about this several years ago. And pursuant to that, we did develop an estimate for, for providing sewer out, how much it would cost to get out. And I'm going to have y'all help me because I'm not that familiar with that, to that light wherever the service station is supposed to be, I guess, in the commission call it. But to get it out at that point.
That's the 151.
Yeah. And it was quite expensive. And it's sort of cost prohibitive to make a jump that large without some type of funding mechanism.
Right.
So that's kind of where it is now.
So it wouldn't have, right, so it would have been pretty expensive. There are obviously like customers out there, but not, it would have taken a long time for it to pay.
Right. In other areas, it's smaller jumps
Yeah.
of gravity. Developer would come in here and then you extend it there and extend it more, and then, that was, right now, that's the point of interest. And by the way, there's people in the intro, that can be served, but, yeah, actually running that line and providing that line was really the quantity at this point.
Right. MSD can justify that investment just, right, compared to like taking care of replacing existing lines under.
Right. Like I said, our surrounding mission is to actually increase the size of the existing lines that's going to tie into for that development and the plant and all that type of thing. But we'll participate in the lines that go out there to the extent of our policy, which is, which I explained some of it.
The other thing I've heard about that from time to time is that there might be, grant funding from like Appalachian Regional Commission or agencies like that to fund different kind of infrastructure projects. Do you guys see that happening, or is it the funds that you have to work with are essentially the funds that you generate from, the customer base, all of us who pay the bills? Are there opportunities out there that for doing things like that for investments?
There used to be a long time ago.
Yeah.
They've since dried up largely.
Okay.
I guess CDBG money was available for certain projects and that type of thing, but that's largely dried up. We have an example of some money coming, but this is the Avada project is probably one of the few that we have an outside money in. The rest of it is just our existing customers' money. So to spend an inordinate amount going in that direction, then we'll have somebody over on the other side, east side, going, oh, how about us over here? But there are other ways you could do it piecemeal, I guess, over time.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
Tom, one thing on that I need to understand better. You had mentioned that you go in with some developers that come in to upgrade line, right? Now, and then you said as new ones come in, they will help fund. Where does that go? Back to MSD or to the developer?
The original developer.
The original, okay.
Yeah.
So,
Not many have availed themselves of that, but that's a very good point. That is one mechanism that we have that would assist that. But you'd have to have a pretty good anchor at that far end to fund the initial capital. So that, and knowing that he probably would recover that in 10 years if that was a really ripe for growth area and people wanted to tie on, then it would, might be worth the investment. But again, that's speculative,
right.
and that's not, that's not something that we would put up with.
It's like, you've got Publix,
Southwest on 74. They put a pumping station in and put a line across the mountain and down the hill. Paid for that to make it work for MSD, work for that ditch too, right?
Excuse me, Dave?
They paid for the pumping station and the lines to tie in.
And they actually paid a fee. This is at the time when we did allow pumping station. This was a while ago. They actually paid a fee for that thing to be converted over to gravity when that becomes available. They have a pump station fee that probably close to $1 million sitting in escrow, and that pays for the pump station. So
In case that goes up.
right.
the ASPCA had to do when there weren't lines.
They're on septic.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good example of it being a little too cumbersome for the type. Now, the ASPCA doesn't use that much water and therefore have sewage waste enough for it to make sense for them to run a line all the way across that. We weren't over on that side of the highway on 26 to do a crossing of that sort over there. And they're high on the hill there. So it was really just directly to that place. Had it been sort of lower down and on a long stream feature, then it would have been on our master plan line to us to participate in it. But for that particular property, it wasn't, so it made a lot more sense to go.
And that wasn't onerous on them at all.
I'm sorry?
That wasn't a problem for them at all to do that. You know,
No.
Why don't you mention Aventine and on Clayton Road, what they had to do with Sunshine Chevy, and they brought a pretty sizable line down from, wasn't it Brevard, across the river? To service the picture you had up earlier was actually the Aventine Apartments on Long Shoals.
No, I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
On Long Shoals,
Aventine Apartments?
Whereabouts?
Right across the river.
More Baptist church.
I don't know why it would have been any longer than just a direct line to them. We have lines, we have a 24-inch on the south side of it. We've got a line going through Duke Energy property as well. We have lines going all the way over. That was a very localized line. If they ran a line, it was just a typical development line to their property, maybe an 8-inch. It wasn't a larger interceptor of sorts that would open up for a whole basin.
So that was just an example of like the former ETJ where it was a line that was run down. So anyway, just thought I'd throw that out there as an example.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of developments that have much shorter runs. Okay, yeah, and constantly we have extensions to the system, like I was saying, just on the edges of our existing system. There'll be runs of 200-300 feet of 8-inch to a development of 100 apartments and that type of thing. Largely, they are not typically larger lines that are trunk lines serving a whole basin. They're typically served in their particular area or maybe somebody directly next to them. When you get into the larger lines going up in sub-basins, that's where you get into the big participation with MSD, and then we'll actually design it right, get the right of way and provide financial assistance to upsize the line and that type of thing. That's where you get the real money. But things have changed. As you all know, development used to be everything with, everybody was coming to the sewer district because sewer was so expensive that was the biggest thing they had because you got to lay it on grade. With the land prices that have gone up, these guys don't blink, and they don't blink. They'll come in and you got $1 million to get to your site. They're throwing it down. They're throwing it down in Woodfin just to get across. They're doing a river crossing for their development, and it's not even that big of a development. So, yeah, it's changed.
Any other questions from commissioners? All right, Nate?
Okay, so we can go back and we can finish the presentation, and of course, if any panelists have to go, we understand we're running for a while today. Let me just do this the easy way. Okay, so we've seen a number of slides today. We've heard from industry experts. What does that mean for us? Obviously, we're here for a purpose, and that's to talk about future growth. as we continue to see the urban area of Asheville and the other municipalities grow, we run into, again, the divide between what's an urban and a rural level of service. So on our fringes, we're going to see those more urban amenities that take place with the water and sewer. It's amazing to think just how often that's taken for granted. You know, the phone call mentioned earlier was somebody calling about the utilities being available in Barnesville. It happens every day. So it's important to continue to point that out. So some of the newer things we're seeing take place that the county, it's kind of newer for the county, is the opportunity to work with NCDOT when they do widening of Mills Gap, or think that there's already sidewalk out on North Louisiana. That's actually maintained by the city of Asheville as part of an interlocal agreement. And we'll continue to have opportunities to see local matches, for instance, in the Mills Gap, to be able to allow for sidewalk when it makes sense, to allow and give pedestrians the opportunity, not just vehicles. Trail system, or greenways, and also other multimodal options. One of the things you're going to be seeing come to your guys' attention at the May 1st meeting of the commissioners is traffic impact studies. You know, most development that's of the threshold that requires it goes to the Board of Adjustment now. Well, the Board of Adjustment that's probably one of the most difficult boards to be on in the county. I mean, they're oftentimes in the newspaper. They're shown on WLOS, and it's a tough position to be in. Well, one of the things we've been seeing is that it's been particularly hard for them to make a decision on some of the more controversial apartment projects. I can't tell you the last apartment project in Buncombe County that was not controversial. We've got one coming up on the agenda on Wednesday, and what we're seeing a lot of is estate lots, vacant tracts. They're parcels that are very near to the city of Asheville and the other municipalities. Utilities are available, but folks, just a lot of people just don't want to see development next door to them. I mean, it's remember the seesaw. It's the delicate balance that we have to play, but we really start having to think about when we look at the cross or the amoeba, what do we have left to develop? If we want to keep the development out of the sensitive areas that are on the side of the mountain or on the ridge tops or out of the floodplain, we have to look at what's left. So we're going to bring you a text amendment that basically says anything that's over the threshold of 75 units in a multifamily or in the near future, a subdivision, will require a traffic impact study. It can cost as much as, if you think about what you're getting for home prices in Asheville, it can cost as much as a new roof. Well, I mean, that's not too much considering the cost of one single family home in this county these days. But what it can do is it can actually help a developer. It can help residents understand, because the big thing we do today too is education, but it can also help a developer. Maybe they need a decel lane, maybe they need a small improvement, maybe it helps with traffic flow in their apartment complex overall. So this is something, while it's not required, it's something we can do. It's within our toolbox. The other thing that we're looking at, and this is participation with Land to Sky, Erica and Mac can speak to this, is we're looking at the potential to do what's called corridor studies. This involves multiple jurisdictions, but it gives you the opportunity to look at our high-impact corridors, 26 or some of the other highways, and it allows us to study them and see what options are available for future growth. So Joe brought up a really good point earlier about what can we do about just the small things. We're undergoing a website, and you're right, a lot of the phone calls we get have to do with, hey, I want to see this project. What does it look like? Let's put in an infrastructure portal. Let's put in links to these representatives that you see before you today. We're on the phone with them every day of the week. But a lot of the public, and since we serve as the conduit, that's something small we can do, and we're willing to do it. And let's better prepare our boards and commissions to make informed decisions. If the Board of Adjustment doesn't feel comfortable because they feel like they're between a rock and a hard place, let's give them a traffic study. Let's give them a small tool that's within our purview to help them, and that's what we're going to be bringing before you. So where do we go from here beyond those small things? Well, one of the things that we're seeing that's helpful is to incentivize density by rewarding smart and sustainable projects. Projects that go above and beyond, projects that include sidewalk, projects that include, if you have utilities available, we give you a break, we give you smaller lots. And what we have to be careful for is these speculative days, we're starting to see some of the traps that we saw in the development boom 1.0. So we do have methods in place to assure that infrastructure is appropriately available. We've got the community-oriented development. That was the East Haven. That's the MHO project out in Swananoa. It gives developers a menu of options, and it allows them to put forward affordable housing or green development options. We're building 2 bus shelters out in Swananoa right now. They are under construction. You can drive out there on 70 and see them. So these are things that are within our purview. We have a new development. It's called a Conservation Subdivision. What does that do? Say you have a piece of property and you're out in Fairview off Cane Creek. Well, there's quite a bit of floodplain there. So what that does is it says, okay, you can build your new subdivision, and we're gonna try to reward you based on your ability to stay out of the floodplain, stay out of those more environmentally restrictive areas. What can we do further that's within our power, that's not relying solely on enabling tools from the General Assembly, because things are changing. They change every day that the Assembly is in session. So let's focus more on what we can do. We also talked a little bit about, at our last meeting, our work session, about extending the allowance of manufacture of factory homes and other zoning districts. So see that part that says LUP 7576? If you look at your land use plan, there's some flags included. This is the planning Bible. This is what we adhere to. Every time we bring you guys a zoning amendment, a text amendment, we go to this book and we start at page 1 and we go all the way to the end. We make sure that what we're proposing is in compliance with this plan. Because ultimately, this plan is enforced, and until we do a new update, this is what we have to go by and present to you. So with the extension of the manufactured factory housing, we will be looking at that with your direction and potentially bring a text amendment within the coming months. It would go to the planning board first, and then it would go on to the Board of Adjustment, but based on our last work session, and I'll wait to hear from you guys again, we feel that you thought that that's something we should explore. Now, there's going to be some controversy associated with that. And on page 75 and 76 with your yellow flag, it mentions sort of the history of where we are with that with Buncombe County in the past. I do also want to mention one other thing. If you flip the next page, if everybody's seen HGTV, you've seen the big wave, the newest, coolest, ultimate thing to do is hitch up a shed on wheels or a small factory home. Well, depends on how you define, I'll correct myself. But there's this thing called the tiny home fad. We have literally fielded calls where we have folks that have gone out and bought a shed at Home Depot or Lowe's, set it up in their backyard, call that their tiny home. It doesn't need a single code. It creates a nightmare scenario. There's also a big push. Folks want to do RVs. They want to set those up. The problem is those don't meet any kind of code requirements. They don't need any of the energy code. And the other thing that we're running across is folks are literally either piping their sewage to God knows where, setting up an outhouse. So I would say that every week we field at least 5 to 7 phone calls regarding tiny homes, which for anyone can use that term, or RVs. This section deals with that on the next page. We talked a little bit about cottage developments. These are the smaller developments that have actually been successful in Asheville. Right now, they're allowed, but you do have to go forward with the conditional use permit process. We'd like to explore the opportunity to look at smaller scale development and not require it to have to go forward for a public hearing. If we've got the infrastructure to do it, let's encourage those smaller mixed-use developments as more of an affordable local option for some of our local developers and builders to do that without having to go, if it's appropriate, without having to go to the conditional use permit and require a public hearing. That's another thing you can do. You can certainly give us direction on that. We constantly evaluate our zoning and subdivision ordinances for improvements. There was a gentleman at our last meeting that expressed some frustration with our subdivision ordinance. That's to be understood. That's the seesaw. But I will say this. We also have to make sure we're not getting taken advantage of. We're going to make sure that the fire marshal can get to a site and there's adequate infrastructure. Because what ultimately happens is someone moves here from Florida, the same person that probably called about the Barnersville utilities, and says, what do you mean I don't have access? Or what do you mean this is substandard? So we're always trying to evaluate what's that mean for, say, right now you may sell that to your brother or your sister, but down the road, who's to say your brother or sister isn't going to sell that to somebody from out of town? I understand you have shared access now. We want to make sure you have access in perpetuity. So just to let you know, we are constantly evaluating those ordinances, and we're looking to you when we need to adjust those accordingly. The other big thing, and the asterisks mean the potential for controversy. Just in truth. So
You need an emoji for that.
we can do emojis next
I think you
time.
need an emoji.
I think we have plenty of millennials in our office that want to do that. Embracing density. So this is the D word conversation. If we want to look at affordable housing and if we really truly want to look at how we're going to move forward, and that's why apartment projects are so controversial, but they are so necessary. Even when we did the Williams-Baldwin project, I remember getting at least 4 to 5 complaints about the traffic from the teachers. So we see it at the smaller scale, we see it at the larger scale. The point is, we handle a lot of complaints and we're prepared to do so, but we do want to make you aware of what the issues are. Okay, so this last one would represent a massive sea change from the way we do business now, but we want to put it out there because we want to give you guys all the options and all transparency. Conditional zoning. The city of Asheville, other municipalities within the state of North Carolina do it. It would basically put development review in your guys' ball court from the Board of Adjustment. I will say from a professional planning perspective, I think some communities overuse it and they rely on it way too heavily. I think we have a process, and I think you'll hear from land use attorneys, developers, that works. We're never going to get rid of the controversy. If the Board of Adjustment doesn't hear it, you're going to hear it. We hear it now. You get the emails, you forward them to me. We answer the emails, we answer the phone calls. We're just throwing it out there because we want to give you guys all the options until you are. We're doing a state of the state. This is where we are. And the last thing I'll say is that the land use plan, first question that's asked is, well, when do you update the land use plan? It's also referred to as the comprehensive plan. Well, there is no exact number. There is no exact date. Right now, there's still a lot of good information, and this plan is still applicable. What my gut feeling is, we might get 3 to 4 years out of it, but it's important to mention that this is the most important guiding document from a planning perspective. We're just kind of putting that out there, and I think that's a good place to stop and hear from the commissioners. Maybe there's some open dialogue with the panel you have before you, but I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to listen to what y'all have to say.
All right. Thanks, Dave. So just one thing, I would like to just kind of speak up for, because there's a lot of great ideas up here, things that we can work on. And one other one that I would like to make a plug for is, I think we're in this community where we know there's going to be a lot of growth, right? So it's really kind of about where's it going to go, what kind of growth is it going to be, but the population is going to grow by 40 or 50,000 people over the next couple of decades, barring some kind of major, change to what people are expecting to happen as part of the world. So it's really about what the growth is going to be like, not whether we're going to have it. And so I think that when we look at our goals for a lot of this kind of goes back to the stuff with the clean energy efficiency, things like that. There's going to be thousands and thousands of new units built, new apartments, single-family housing, new buildings. The Energy Innovation Task Force looked a lot at this stuff, and obviously there's been a big focus on how do we, do energy efficiency on our existing housing stock. And there's great work going on in that arena. There's going to be a lot of new construction too, and a pretty high percentage of the total development out there in the next 20 years will be stuff that will be new construction. So I think it'd be great for us to do what we can to encourage new construction to meet, the best energy efficiency goals that we can. We know that we cannot require anything above the state building code. The state building code is basically the law of the land across the state. So we can't set different standards, but we can encourage it. And so, and I was going to say something, Jason walked out, I was going to say something nice about Duke. Duke actually has, as we've looked through all these different Duke programs and the Energy Innovation Task Force, one of the things that everyone was sort of struck by as we studied it is that Duke actually has really good incentives to encourage green building practices in new construction. So I would be really supportive of us doing some things in our permitting department to also offer some more local incentives from the county standpoint, because I think between what we could do locally to encourage it and what Duke does to encourage it, we could see a large percentage of the new construction in our area use really great practices. We've already got a very strong, forward-looking building community in Buncombe County, and I think if we give them the right, encouragement and resources, then a very high percentage of this new growth we see is going to be very efficient. So that's one thing I'd like to make a plug for as we think about policies going forward. Other questions or thoughts from other commissioners? Jasmine.
Thanks, this is all fantastic. Could you go a little deeper on the cottage developments issue? Just appreciated that introduction.
Sure.
A little more there.
So it came about, and I think Alan Glines back there from the city. Do you remember what year the city instituted the college? Was it 07?
Yeah, 05, 06.
Okay. So it was a way to allow like a small, 7 to 12 unit, typically smaller homes arranged in usually like a courtyard pattern where you would, you drive in, you park to the side, and they were so dense that it was just easy to walk to, kind of like a garden apartment feel. And you might have a shared courtyard in the middle. This might be particularly palatable to our retiring boomers. And that's another thing we got to think about is our generational changes too. So this would be, the ability would be, you could do it now, but it requires this public hearing. Can we look at it from the perspective of if you've got the utilities there and it's of such a small scale, can we bring that to just a permitted use with special requirements? That's what the USSR means, it's not Russia. Use by right, subject to special requirements.
Okay. And how, are you seeing people wanting to do this with more frequency, or do you think if the process was streamlined, that might help?
I think so at this juncture, because we're getting enough folks that want a single-story living, or their pattern has changed enough where it could also be arrangement where like a family member lives in a smaller, like garage apartment side of like a larger, it just gives people the options in a more typically affordable or workforce pattern development that doesn't have to go to a conditional use permanent process.
Thank you.
Hey, my question is, I was glad to hear you mention affordable housing. By most of the area I represent in the city of Asheville, it's so expensive, to build or to live in the city of Asheville now. We see that a lot of the people who can't afford to live in Asheville want to move out in the county. And I think when we look ahead for the future, we need to make sure that we're doing a good job of planning to include affordable housing, to make it easier for people to move, in the county and not leave, go down to Madison, McDowell, or, leave the county. And I see taxes leaving with it.
That's an excellent point. Your new ex-urban, actually one of the things highlighted there, listen to this. The decision to live in exurbia may not always reflect preference. In many areas, home buyers are driving until they qualify for affordable housing at the fringe. So when my wife, who's the planner in Marion, says, hey, we're seeing a little development, well, guess what that means? Well, PSNC sees the writing on the wall with the movement also of the gas line there. The next area for push is going to be, that's one of the areas out east. It's going to be Old Fort. Old Fort's just on the cusp. It's going to be Marion. It's more into Leicester. It's Fairview. So otherwise, we're pinched and pulled. We're flooded. We're constrained. It's a great point. And that's why we included this little article in your packets.
So I'll give my plug again on the manufactured housing unit. I think it's very important here to remember that this is new construction only. New construction, multi-section is what the planning department's looking at. When you talk about cottage homes, even in the city, but if you're doing them out in the county, there's no easier application or better application, for manufactured factory built, in 4 to 6, unit arrangements in little cottage areas, slab poured, very, very simple construction, and, for less, $100,000 for a lot of those units to exclude the land. So, as we move forward, I appreciate that it is being moved forward. In some of these neighborhoods, people will stay in those neighborhoods. They're allowed to be able to get a home that fits in that neighborhood as well as affordable. So keep pushing.
Yeah, we want to bring you a variety of patterns. In fact, we found, we had a discussion with a gentleman the other day, and there's one manufacturer in South Carolina that is meeting the building code with these smaller cottage units, and it's a modular construction. But we met with a gentleman the other day. I don't necessarily know that it's affordable, but the retiring boomers seem to like this idea of the, let's just say, tiny home looking units. His product was affixed to permanent foundation and they met building code. Although what he was telling us is that it was $100,000 for one of these units. And I think you mentioned last time that they are trendy but expensive sometimes. And he said that on top of that, you got to pay him $500 a month for basically a fee to be in one of these communities. They just had a grand opening down in Flat Rock.
Oh, I know some people that went there from Fairview. Yeah.
And, some of the boomers, they like that because it's just a way to retire and not have to worry about lawn maintenance and, those sorts of things.
Well, you got two different things. Just remember when you're looking at manufacturers, the reason you're looking at manufacturers versus modulars, there's 10, 15, almost $20,000 in difference in some setup issues, and you're not going to be able to tell the difference between the two homes. So that's why we're moving towards that.
And we put the note in there about the design standards that are within our purview, not ones that the legislature is stripped down, that we'll bring you and we'll run it through the planning board. And
But exploring cottage developments, smaller, manufactured, new construction, manufactured home. I mean, San Diego, California's doing it. So cottage development is a good step to pursue along with, allowing multi-section, energy efficient, manufactured homes.
Sure. And if it's an option available, we want to bring that and we want to make sure that our
All you gotta do is design it.
code accommodates
Draw
it.
it.
Yep.
Just use that product, and it'll be affordable.
And,
Go ahead, I'm sorry, I thought you were ready. Go ahead.
Excuse me.
Go for it.
First thing is I'm not for zoning. Second thing is 75 homes to go out for a study when you gotta have 300 in the city. This is turning into a disaster, is what it's turned into. When you have to go out for 75 homes to be able to do a study, that these gentlemen basically can tell us if the roads will handle it or not, because when people call me, I tell them we don't do roads. We don't have a road. We don't need to discuss the road. That's the problem. You discuss the road with the state, they own the roads. Property, people own the property. Now, 2009 has come about. This is not the city of Buncombe. This is the county of Buncombe. Well, I might be wrong. But making all these rules that we're looking at to tell people what they can do and they can't do, we're getting out of hand. Again, I'm not following the city. I know you used to work there, but we're not, this is not going to turn into whatever their little book turned into. We don't have a zoning deal. It was good. The people that had trailers could live in it. Now, people have trailers, if they move out, you got to put a house there. If it worked back then, why can't it work now? But, people that move here and they want to change something, they don't need to move here. If they want to come here because that's what they like to do, Sweden Creek Road, they're getting ready to widen it. Well, they're putting apartments out there. But I live on 74 acres, and they raise Cain about them apartments further hill. Don't bother me. No red light, no nothing. We're gonna have a wreck every now and then. We have wrecks up and down. But I am totally against everything that we're trying to do here to tell people what they can do. Period. This is Buncombe County. I came here 53 years ago. I didn't want to change it. We got people on this board that comes here that wants to change what we're doing in this county. We got people coming here that's lived here 10 years that don't want apartments. And we got people that don't want to look at a house on a steep slope that live on a steep slope because they don't want their view blocked. Now, that's just where I'm at. I'm probably old, senile, and what I think is probably wrong. We've had enough problems in Buncombe County. We don't need any more. We don't need any more. This whole list up here, half of it's useless in my mind. 75 units, houses. It's just like putting up there mobility, you put bicycles. We got more cars, we got bicycles. Mr. President and myself, a bicycle comes across the crosswalk on Marion Avenue. Put a tag on it. This one back here needs a tag on it, they pay tax on it. They need a helmet, and they need to ride on the road like anything else. That's mobility. Give them a road to ride. Don't let them run through, cross streets, cross anything else. But that's where I'm at, Nate. We're not going to turn this into the city of Asheville. Not as long as I'm here. I will fight for this county. I will fight for the people of the county. I hear from them. I hear dearly from them. But we're outruling everything that's happening. Every time I look, we're going to have a different rule. We've got a planning board. We don't need to make a decision. This decision's made the other day, turned into a bad deal. Turned up in the newspaper that our commissioners did. Bad deal. We don't. Enough's enough. And that's just where I'm at. I appreciate everybody in here. And I can't hardly believe that y'all put $700,000 in this energy efficient deal. And then we're out searching for more money. I thought it was going to be just a simple little deal. But it's not simple. Jason, not simple at all. So, you know, I live in a house that I bought 27 years ago. It was inefficient then, it's still inefficient today. You know, only thing I see is wrong is where Joe Belcher lives, he's got a different fire company, the fire costs more. You know, thanks for your time, but all this right here, take half of it off, we might be able to do something. But it's worthless in my eyes. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, and I think, start with what the chair said about, working with developers and, encouraging all that we can for affordable housing, and, you know, the reality is the land is so expensive, and as soon as anybody, whether they're here for 5 minutes or 50 minutes or something, like, you know, density is near them, they react, and that's part of it, and I'm kind of like used to it. If we really have a commitment to affordable housing, then we have to educate the public about why we're doing.
Yeah, and in fact, a lot of it's just education, so,
They have great things.
right. And the gentleman that, you know, you received an email about, I gave a call, and he said, you know, I said, well, sir, just like, you know, your neighborhood was sort of built, and at the time, it probably looked definitely like it was impactful, but he ultimately understood and said that he was actually from Florida, just moved up here from Florida, but was originally from upstate New York. So just gives credence to the whole joke around the planning department. Most calls we get don't originate in the 828 area code. So we try to make adjustments. And again, back to the seesaw, just because you're from another area, we sort of have to manage that expectation of, I understand that's the way you used to do it where you're from, but this is Buncombe County, and we do have to balance the needs of our urban citizens as well as our rural citizens. And we don't have just one, we have both, so we're really trying to find that middle.
Well, and whether it's been 50 years or 5 days, if they're living here, they're still citizens with equal pay.
Other questions or feedback?
Thank you all so much for your time and the work you do every day. Thanks for organizing this. I've learned a tremendous amount today.
It's a great group.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you do.
You know, just one other thought I would just leave for the day is, you know, I think this whole issue of annexation and the growth of the county is going to be an issue that we're going to have to continue to look at. Not that annexation is coming back. I think the days of like annexation are over. But you know, one of the things when I was you know, in the whole water issues and the growth of the water system and how we've had all these laws all over many decades that are very unique to Asheville. Again, even like Weaverville and other communities don't have them. But one of the things that really struck me about that is kind of, you know, sort of studying that issue is just how much that has placed our community in a different situation than really I think any other community around the state in terms of the municipalities in the county not growing in the way that other municipalities have. Because in most other cities across the state, when developers want to connect to the water system, they voluntarily annex into the city as a condition of getting water service. And we haven't done that in Buncombe County ever, right? So the only type of annexation, I mean, every now and then there's like an ABC store or some kind of, you know, highly unusual situation like that where someone chooses to annex to, you know, to be able to get a license or something like that. But, you know, in every other city across the state, the normal way that cities grow is just through voluntary annexation as new developers connect to municipal water systems. But we have not done that. And with the other changes by the legislature in recent years that now also limit any kind of involuntary annexation, the corporate boundaries of the municipalities in Buncombe County are essentially fixed. So in 30 years from now, we're going to have all this new growth, and the city limits of Asheville and Weaverville and Woodfin, all these other towns, are going to basically look exactly like they do today, even though Buncombe County is going to have 50,000 more people living in it. Many of them, a lot of them will live in Asheville or live in Weaverville. I mean, the towns are, definitely have a lot of infill development going on, but a lot of it's going to happen right around the edges of these cities, in these areas that were shown on the maps today, where we have water and sewer and some other infrastructure, but they're not within any municipal boundaries. And so, I think in the long run, the question kind of becomes, because a lot of these areas they're not gonna, like the areas out in Barnersville, sure, it's unrealistic for them to expect urban levels of service, but these areas where you're gonna start having 10 and 20 units per acre, basically areas that look and act like towns and cities, just like inside the city limits, but which do not have a city council, do not have a town council. How are those areas going to be served in the future, right? And I don't have any great answers to it, but I think it's going to be one of these things that we are going to have to think about and wrestle with in the future in a way that most other county governments around the state don't, because in other counties, the cities just kind of naturally grow as urbanization happens, but because of policy decisions, some made a long time ago, some made more recently, we're kind of in this sort of unique situation, I think. So anyway, I just want to throw that out. We hear different things, different projects that come in from, Inca and Candler for different, sidewalks that folks want out there, or roads and recreational facilities, and they're all, from other areas too, Swananoa, and they're all good ideas. They're kind of things that counties don't typically get involved in, but I think, we're just going to have to think about those things in a way that's a little bit different from other county governments around the state, I think. So just wanted to put it out there.
Well,
Mr. President, go
let me
ahead.
throw it out here.
Go for it.
I've been here 59 years. Probably lived here longer than any other, commissioner.
No.
You moved out.
I was here long before you.
You moved out, come back.
No, I was only out for college.
Oh, okay. Well, you went on education. I said you No, but I guess what is, back 70s, we all know what has happened downtown in the county for the good, any way you look at it. But now I hear the people that come here in the 80s, late 80s and 90s, that are complaining like us homestead people, this is not the Asheville I want to move to. So I think what you're saying, Brownie, I have to disagree. If we're wanting to move the city everywhere, or the growth of Black Mountain, I think that's where we're going to lose our identity of the mountains, of what we've got. If we become Atlanta or Charlotte, who's going to want to come here? I mean, a lot of people are coming here. But whenever I hear the people of 20 years complaining about what's going on, and the people of 40, 50 years complaining, pretty soon the new ones that's moving in here, how long are the trust fund kids going to be able to survive here? How long is their parents going to keep them up? And I guess a great thing we got is the Blue Ridge Parkway and the National Forest, that we don't have to worry about that part. There was something up here about we are twice as big. I like facts. We have twice as much acreage, but half of our acreage from Blue Ridge Parkway, National Forest, and the Biltmore State, we don't control none of that, correct? So we're actually the same size as the counties you was talking about. So I'm an old timer, is I don't want Asheville to get too big, because I foresee what's coming here with all the apartments. The building, I wish that we could mandate, I'll go with Brownie on this, the energy deal, is when we see these new apartments that's 2 and 3 years old, that the windows are sweating in them, I don't think that is good energy, is it, Jason? These sidings they've got on, Why are we not putting brick? You look at a lot of our old buildings here. They're not wood, they're brick. They're here for a long time. These apartments, I'm afraid, are going to become eyesores in 20 years. So why are we not building apartments that can be attractive 40 years from today? That's just my 2 cents.
Still don't, and it's not actual.
I can't say enough how I appreciate what you've done. I lived in a small mountain town in Colorado, and the zoning that they had 30 years ago, 40 years ago, would probably make every commissioner's hair stand on end. But
Not mine.
yeah, but what they've done,
Thank you, Roy.
what they've done, it looks exactly like it did 40, 50 years ago. So, you know, people, the way we keep everything just as it is, and what could improve it is with zoning. Because when you, with the free market, that's when we get Myrtle Beach. But this little mountain town, it looks exactly the same as it did 50 years ago. And the zoning was, if you had 80 acres, you could sell 40, but you could never increase density. But that's how they were able to maintain how it looks now. And it's, I don't think anybody wants that, but that's what they did there.
All right, hey, any other questions or comments before we adjourn? We're gonna have a commission meeting starting at 5. So, going once, going twice. I want to thank all of you for taking your whole afternoon to be with us. And it's really helpful to hear how all the different plans, you know, kind of look side by side. And so a lot to think about. And we really appreciate y'all taking the time to be with us. Thank you.